All right. Can people hear okay? It's the thumbs up. Excellent. All right. We'll get the meeting started here in a couple of minutes. Everybody's line should be muted. I'll go through and unmute the board members and administration. Everybody else should be muted. And then we're also streaming live on YouTube and recording this on Zoom's cloud as well for capture and replay. We'll put it up onto the school's websites after the meeting. Just so everybody's aware, we are recording. All right, so we'll get started here in another minute or two. We'll allow a few more people to join that are coming on. Just give me a minute. I'm unmuting.
Hi, Todd.
Hello. Get everybody unmuted for all the board members here so we can get started, and then we'll unmute people as we get to public comment, and then we'll mute people again just to keep the background noise down. And again, this is a bit experimental for us, so we appreciate everybody your patience as we go through this. The last meeting I think was okay. We just had a committee meeting before. We tried it. So we're learning as we go here.
Hey, Maureen.
And happy St. Patrick's Day. Glad to see everybody wearing green today.
I'm not.
Oops.
I can hold up a paper plate. But
There we go. I do have the green tie on. We have a dress code in the home office, as I mentioned at the committee meeting. All right, I think I've got everybody. Let's check here. I think I've got all the board members unmuted now and administration.
That mommy.
Hey. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
All right. So again, for all the board members and administration, I see on here right now, you should all be. And you can mute your back. You can mute yourself if you want to, but I've got everybody else on the meeting muted. It looks like we've got about 44 people on right at the moment. So if you do need to speak into the board members, I don't have you unmuted. Either wave or do the little chat symbol there, so we can get you unmuted and you can speak. And then again, just as protocols, we're trying to figure this out. We'll have everybody on mute, and then when we go to the public comment portion, we'll unmute and we'll ask people to identify themselves. For any of the roll calls and any of the voting, again, we'll try to do some roll call towards that because it's a bit hard to tell who's voting. Same thing on the motions. We'll try to repeat those. Okay, so it looks like we've got about 46 or so people, 47 people on right now. And I think all the board members, I've got Gwen on, Maureen, Mike, Cheryl's on. Just going down the list here. Karen is now on.
Sorry, I'm trying to turn up the sound.
Hello, Karen.
And we've got
Hi.
Tom and Stephanie, Gina, Mike Santangeli on, Scott's on.
I don't have a stand.
Okay, all right. So I believe we've got quorum. I don't see, is Juliet on?
I thought I saw her name flash up.
Yeah, I think she's on.
A couple of people were texting me. They're having technical. I see Juliet's on there. Okay. All right. So let me just quickly one more time go through the roll to make sure we've got quorum. Got Cheryl on, Mike, Juliet, Gwen, Karen, Mary Lee. Let's check the roll here. Mary Lee's on. Okay, let me unmute. And Maureen. And then We have Gina, Tom, Mike, Stephanie, and a few others on here, I think.
What about the recording secretary?
All right.
Todd is on too, Todd.
Okay, great. Okay, so, all right, let's go ahead and call to order because we've got quorum here and 47 members total on here.
Is Sarah the recording secretary?
Yes, I see Sarah's on as well.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and call to order here at 7:33. And our first item of business is the approval of the March 5th Region 9 Board of Ed regular meeting budget workshop meeting minutes. So I'll look for a motion from the board.
So moved.
Approve the minutes. Is that Mike?
Yes.
Second,
And the second was by, I'm sorry,
me.
Maureen.
Maureen, thank you.
What's the noise?
Okay, feedback there. Thank you for muting. All right. And I think just the general rule, right? If you're not speaking, if you can mute your line just to keep the background noise down. And then again, for members of the public, we'll mute all the lines during the business portion of the meeting. We'll unmute during public comments. All right, so we have a motion for the minutes. Anybody from the board have any suggested changes or edits? I know it's quite a lengthy set of minutes from the last meeting. Very thorough. Thank you, Julia. Anyone, any changes, corrections, additions to the meeting minutes from the board?
No.
Okay. So no changes, then all in favor of the approval of the minutes from the March 5th meeting, please signify by saying aye. Raising your hand
Aye.
too is helpful. Thank you.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, no opposition, no abstains. Okay, so the minutes pass. All right,
So we're supposed to identify ourselves before we speak, I guess, in order to be legal. So you have to say, this is Mike and I'm, or whatever.
all right.
Just-
All right, well, we'll appreciate that. We'll try to help by that. And like I said, we're learning as we go here. So our next item is student comment, and I think I saw we have I'm looking for this. To have the student representative on.
Do we have Max on there?
Max on here. Oh, there. Okay, sorry. There's a different name on here. Give me 1 second. I was looking for your name. All right, I'll unmute your line. All right, go ahead, Max.
Hello, this is Max Monson.
Hi, Max.
Hi, Max.
I don't have an official document as far as the updates like I usually do. I figured I'd just come on and see if there was anything you guys were looking for. I know there's important stuff to talk about with everything that's happening, but if you guys were looking for a student perspective on everything that's going on or anything else like that, I figured I would at least show up and see if you guys needed any sort of student comment. So
It would be nice to hear, yeah, what do you guys, with everything that's going on with the coronavirus quarantine stuff, what are the students feeling like?
sure. For me personally, like most students, I've been home. My parents have instituted the same kind of let's not leave the house, social distancing, everything that everyone's been hearing. As far as communication teachers, I've gotten a couple totally optional here if you want to do it. It's more specifically for my AP classes. If there's anything you'd like to complete, here's something that might be helpful that they put out either through email or through Google Classroom. And then, yeah, just the emails from Dr. McMorrin and Dr. Pinn have been very helpful as far as knowing what's happening and knowing what kind of plan there is going forward. As far as what I've been hearing from my fellow students, it's mainly just this kind of waiting on the edge of our seats, you know, what's coming next. Like we've seen that next Monday date is looking most likely for online learning, which is exciting or upsetting depending on the student you talk to. But yeah, it's definitely just a lot of kind of let's sit back and see what happens. And as of now, like we only have it looks like, as far as what we've been hearing, we'll only have that actual 6 days away from learning. So in talking with my APUSH teacher, she seems like, you know, if it's really only 6 days off of learning, that won't create a huge problem for trying to fit curriculum in for the AP test and all that. But yeah, a lot of waiting around and a lot of just kind of what's going to happen next. You know, like everyone knows, it's a novel situation. So everyone's just kind of taking it by ear, and I'm sure we're as eager to hear what happens as any parent or board rep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Board members, any other questions for Max?
No.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Max, for
Thank you, Max.
participating. We appreciate it. And take it back to your homework.
Will do. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So now we'll move to public comment. So again, this will be interesting. We'll see how this works. We're gonna unmute all the lines, and right now we've got about 53 people on. So if it does get too noisy, I'm gonna mute all the
I gotta get a
lines,
holder for this.
and we'll have to do it. I'll have to go around. Either you can flag with the chat symbol with the hand waving, so I can see, or you can wave your hand on the video if you've got that on. Not everybody is displaying video, so that will make it a little bit challenging, but we'll try to figure it out so we can get to everybody to comment that wants to. We'll also ask that you keep your comments to about 2 minutes or less, if you don't mind, because we do want to get on to the budget discussion. And so we'll try to limit that as much as we can, and give you the opportunity to speak as well. And again, just to remind everybody that we are streaming live, and this is also being recorded to be posted later. So we'll start, and I see Jeff there. So I'll go ahead and unmute all the lines. And I see Jeff waving. So Jeff, do you want to go ahead and start?
Yes, can you hear me? I'm ready to go. Sound good?
Yes.
Dot?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'll begin. Thank you. Jeff Fligelman, Pocahontas Road, Reading. Thank you to the board and the administration for having this meeting at this extraordinary time. Your efforts to keep our institutions moving forward, along with your resilience and innovation, send a positive message to our your efforts to transition to distance learning send an important message to our students. No matter where you are, your education matters, and we'll figure out how best to teach you. In the spirit of striving for a sort of normalcy, here is a statement that I had intended to deliver on March 12th. Thank you for this open forum. Thank you for listening. Last Thursday, you voted to keep 2 sections of Latin at Barlow. We were all elated and relieved. There's a lot of pressure on students when they don't know if they will be able to complete their studies. I told my son that as long as the budget passes, there will be 2 sections.
Quiet!
Without spending any more money on the program, can start at the same level, they will come, and history proves that as well. I understand that some were reticent to allow the 4 students who registered for Latin 2 to continue in the program. Please know that I have heard from multiple families that they were unable to register for Latin when they met with their guidance counselors. The only way they got into the class was to override the system. Also, families were likely scared off by the visible thinking document that in black and white proposed the end of Latin at Barlow in June 2022, and also proposed, I quote, not allowing grade 9 enrollment. Further, as you discussed, having one class with 4 different levels of Latin or any subject simply is not right. Can you imagine a math class where the teacher was supposed to teach geometry to the freshmen, algebra to the sophomores, pre-calc to the juniors, and calculus to the seniors, all simultaneously? As a teacher, I can tell you it doesn't work. That's also common sense. So again, thank you for doing right by our students and extending an opportunity to every student from Easton and Reading, all in a remarkably efficient manner. By the way, you have also kept our school on par with our Durgay neighbors and even helped students better prepare for the SAT. And now I should be able to sit down. but I learned that almost immediately after last week's vote on the Latin program, an effort of pushback began. Did anything materially change in less than 48 hours? Of course not. Also, I learned that tonight, when apparently no one will be watching, here we are, there might be another vote on the Latin program that would unwind what was decided last week. I was stunned. I know that there were votes against, but there usually are. I've gone to dozens and dozens of board meetings over the years, and sometimes I'm happy with the vote, and sometimes I'm disappointed, but never, not once, have I ever expected that the board would vote again. Deliberation, vote, decision. That's how it works. Not deliberation, vote, don't like the outcome, vote again. And let's be very clear. We are talking about $17,523. In no way is that going to tip the proposed $24,396,537 budget out of balance. And it's important to note that this budget comes in at about a 1% increase, which is remarkably low. Further, one may ask if keeping two sections of Latin class sizes elsewhere are larger. The answer is no. Not a single dollar has been shifted from another discipline to keep the two sections. So why are we talking about this? A greater number of students from Easton will be going to Barlow next year, which means that a greater percentage of the budget is also swinging toward Easton. For the past 2 years, Reading has had to deal with swings that raised Reading's budget. Regardless, we are one school district, and it is untenable to change the budget and the programming year to year because enrollment swings one way or the other. So I urge you not to put forward another motion on the Latin program. Doing so will mean that no decision the board makes can be assumed to be resolved because there could always be a vote the next week with another outcome. We face a slippery slope. We really want a system where every decision, whether it's about basketball, a secretary, or an art program, is subject to more lobbying, more motions, and more votes? Of course not. The plane has landed. It's time to move on. Thank you very much for your time.
Great, thank you. Anyone else would like to speak? And again, I had to mute everyone's lines with the background noise since there are a lot of people on. So if you want to speak, if you could use either the hand sign on there or there's the chat window. I've got that open. If you could put your name in there and then I'll unmute the line so we can keep the background noise down. So if you, Jennifer DeJesus, so I'm going to unmute your line if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you, sir. This is Jennifer DeJesus from Laurel Drive here in Easton. First and most importantly, I want to thank Dr. McMorrin and all of you for your efforts to keep educating our students in the midst of this crisis, and it's not going unrecognized, so thank you. I did attend the last Board of Ed / Board of Finance meeting, and I greatly support the budget that was proposed. I'm a strong supporter of keeping the class sizes small. I'm also a very strong proponent for Spanish as early as possible in our children's education. The sooner we can get that into the schools, the sooner they'll benefit from it. I also know that extracurricular activities have been cut. I really feel that in the upper grades, that's certainly so important, and I hope that that will be there when my daughter gets there. And lastly, ensuring that our teachers have continuing education. These were my key takeaways from the last board meeting that I fully and strongly support, to ensure that our teachers have the skill set that they need to help our children grow and flourish in our school systems. Thank you all very much for having the time to listen. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So again, I'm muting everyone's line. So if anyone from the public, again, if you'd like to speak, either put your name into the group chat to everyone so we can see it, or do the little hand symbol to raise your hand, or wave if you've got your video on. Right now, I don't see anyone else, so we'll give it just another minute in case you're trying to find the chat session or where the little hand symbol is to wave. Okay, I see Chris. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute your line.
Hi,
All
Todd
right.
and everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Just to echo the last comment, also my gratitude to the administration for all the hard work this past couple of weeks, living in really unprecedented time. I know the stress that everybody's under. Secondly, I would put in another word of please with respect to the freshman basketball team for next year to find the funding for it and maintain the appropriation. And third, I know that Jeff Parker is planning to attend tonight. I'm not sure if he's been able to make it on, but I would be in accord with his view that to the extent that Region 9 has unspent funds that it intends to carry over in any capacity, that now would be an appropriate time to release them back to the towns so that future budgets can be offset as we enter what is probably going to be very difficult financial times in the next few months. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. Anyone else from the public that would like to speak? And if you can use the hand symbol to wave, or if you've got video going, you can wave. Okay, I see. Sorry, just give me 1 minute. I think John Stinson, let me just find you here. All right, here we go. John, your line should be unmuted now if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
It is, Todd. Thank you to everyone, but I see Linda Meyer Mitchell is trying to raise her hand on one of the other windows, so I just wanted to give a shout out. Thank you to everyone. I'll save my comments for my own board. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Let me find Linda.
Hello.
Yep. Hi, Linda. There we go. Thank you.
Hi.
Yes, thank you.
I was
Sorry.
trying my best to
Appreciate your
wave.
patience. All right, go ahead and introduce yourself, name and town, and then
Okay.
go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for the help. My name is Linda Meyer Mitchell, and I'm at 50 Huckleberry Road in Reading. I want to thank the board for including freshman boys and girls basketball program in the budget for next year. I know budget discussions are still happening, and I am, along with many others, hoping you will make sure it stays in the final version of the proposed budget. The number of incoming Barlow students interested in participating in boys and girls basketball is large. While we always need to be very mindful of expenditures, the cost of freshman basketball is minimal compared to the overall budget. Given the number of students that would benefit from the boys and girls program, it is definitely worth the small cost. I know you are all acutely aware of the many benefits participation in an athletic program like this provides for all children, such as physical health and well-being, improved academics, the ability to be part of a team and work together to develop leadership and teamwork skills, and accountability and responsibility, to name a few. Our children are off their screens and developing skills that will serve them well in careers and life. We have such a large percent of our children involved in athletics at Barlow for very good reasons. Additionally, I think the world has changed in the last several weeks, and in light of what is happening in the world today, it becomes even more important to make sure our children have opportunities to participate in many activities next year, including freshman basketball. Our kids will unfortunately spend weeks, if not months, of their time this spring fairly isolated to confront the current pandemic, and many much loved and beneficial activities will be canceled. So it is crucial that they have ample opportunities next year to participate in various extracurricular activities and sports teams to develop the teamwork and leadership skills that they need. These activities are the most important part of our children's high school experience and the part they will remember forever. I want to thank you once again for including it in the budget. And I think life has changed. We hope to see it there next year so the kids can all benefit. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. Anyone else? I see Elizabeth Gray. And let me just I think your line is unmuted now. So Elizabeth Gray. I can't hear you. All right, maybe she dropped. I don't see her on anymore. All right. I don't see her on audio. So Elizabeth, we can't hear you if you're connected. All right, we'll move on. Anyone else from public want to comment? Again, raise your hand virtually on the screen, or really if you're on the video side. All right. All right, Elizabeth, I see you on audio now, so I'm going to unmute your line. And if you go ahead and should be unmuted now, Elizabeth, you want to go ahead and provide your name and address, and go ahead and make your comment.
Hi, this is Joanne. Joanne, several of us at the Gray household who would like to just thank you for holding this meeting during this coronavirus crisis. We live on Lone Town Road in Reading. We are very happy that the board last week decided to include Latin, actually 2 sections of Latin in the budget, and we just want to thank all the board members who have who voted yes for it, and just let you know that it's really important, and that the students who are taking Latin are thrilled that it is available to them again, and their anxiety level about that has been reduced. At least it was until we heard the news that there was a possible vote today to sort of unwind it, and we are asking you, please don't unwind it. Latin is just too important to the school, to keep it to our property values, just to the reputation of Joel Barlow. So thank you.
All right. I'm Elizabeth Gray, and I want to thank the board for your decision to save the Latin program, because it's raised all of our spirits. And I've been taking Latin for 5 years, and I've never regretted my decision to take Latin instead of Spanish or French, because it's made it very easy to have at least a very basic understanding of other Romance languages. So like if one of my friends is talking Italian or like French, I can sort of understand what she's saying. I sort of understand what they're saying, which I think is very valuable, especially in America where there are so many different languages that are always being spoken. And it's also helped me to understand the origin of many different vocabulary words that we use in English. And I'm glad that Latin's now available to anyone in Reading or Easton who wants to learn it. And so I thank you for your decision to save the Latin program at Barlow.
Virginia Gray from 15 Lone Town Road, Reading, Connecticut. I'm a middle school student at JMS, and I take Latin. Last week's vote meant a lot to us Latin students, and we would like to thank you all for your hard work at the Latin program, for us to continue with it, and allowing my fellow students to start Latin. I would also like to thank you for promising to let us follow through with our educations in Latin. Your hard work means so much to us, and I hope that in the final vote you allow us to take Latin. Thank you for your time.
And hi, I don't know if you can see me. I'm Reed Gray, 15 Lone Town Road, also in Reading. I'd just like to say I think Latin and the calculus class that were voted on last week are sort of threshold issues. Threshold in the sense that you could give everybody $1 for Latin, you could give everybody $1 for calculus, and that's how much you'd save by cutting them from the budget. But at the same time, you would end up threatening or putting us past the threshold of whether we are a DRGA district. And I think that the damage to people's property values would be far greater than those $2. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else would like to comment from the public? Again, if you can go into the chat, raise your hand either virtually, and let's see. All right. The Hawks, there's two people on the Hawks family, so I'm going to unmute your line.
Okay. Hi,
There
I'm
we go.
Sydney Hawks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay.
Please name and address, please. And then
I'm
keep your
Sydney
comments to
Hawks
2 minutes.
from
Thank you.
54 High Ridge Road in Reading, and I'm an 8th grader at John Reed Middle School. This year I played on the 8th grade girls Reba team, but it seems like we may not be able to play next year. There are lots of 8th grade boys and girls entering Joe Barlow next year who played Reba and Rec, who played on Reba and Rec teams last year, who won't get to play basketball next year if there is no freshman team. So please continue to fund the freshman team. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. Anyone else from the public? Just scanning down the roll here quickly to see if anyone else is waving their hand. All right, I think that's it. We will have another public comment section at the end of the meeting. So thank you everyone for commenting and trying out the technology here with us. All right, we'll move on then to board member comment. And so again, I'm going to mute everybody's lines, except, and I'm going to go through and unmute board members. So just give me 1 minute while I do that. And maybe I'll just do roll as I go and unmute you. So I'll just start, it's in alphabetical order as I go down here. So Cheryl, let me unmute you. Any board member comments?
Other than thanking everyone for participating and experimenting with this technology, so far it's going well. No comment at this point.
Okay, thank you. Gwen?
Yes.
Any comment? Board member? So I'm going down the list. Karen?
No, not right now.
Okay.
Sorry for the clock.
It's time to move on. I get it. The bells are playing. All right, let me continue down the list here. Merit Lee, board member comment.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. McMorran, for Gina Pinn, for the entire administration, central office. This is not easy, and it is so much appreciated what you all are doing, the sweating that you're going through right now. And thanks to all the members of the public for making sure that they remain calm and know that they're in good hands. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I think I've got everybody muted on the board. Maureen, sorry.
All I wanted to do was thank everyone and to say that this experience is a little bit like jumping off a cliff and building your wings on as you jump. And we all have to remember that as we go forward.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. I think that's everyone from the board then. So we'll move on to administrative reports. And I was trying to unmute the administration as well as I was going through. I'll ask that we try to keep the reports relatively short if we can for both administrative and Board of Ed committee reports so that we can get onto the budget discussion. Tom or Gina, if you want to go through the reports and then see Tom. Okay, go ahead, Tom. You should be unmuted.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm on behalf of the administrators and the 12-month people. I want to thank you all for the many acts of kindness and statements of support that you've sent to us as we're working out this process. I'm not going to spend a lot of time now, but it is our hope that we can get the teachers back to a PD preparation day as early as this Friday, with the intention of getting the kids back into virtual distance learning starting Monday. I thank you all, and I know that you know that we are making this up in real time, and it's pretty complex task for us to solve, but we are eager to get the kids engaged. The teachers are missing the kids and maybe already reaching out to them. A couple of things that we have to do between now and then is work on the logistics and technological part of remote learning. And so I encourage members of the public, parents, to take a look at things like your access to the internet, to the school websites, to Power School. You'll be receiving from us tomorrow an email where we're trying to provide some of the district's Chromebooks to folks. I do not have 2,600 Chromebooks. But we are going to try to distribute them fairly and broadly. Those that we do, we have several hundred for each district. And I guess the most important thing to me is for parents in the community to know, teachers to know, we're all going to be flexible as we work this out. There is please to have no concern, no fear that in the first several days as we work out distance learning and remote instruction, that the kids will be penalized or there'll be punitive measures or anything as we all learn to get onto the system and communicate. We'll problem solve in real time. We are also working with all 10 of our unions and associations in Easton, Reading, and Region 9 to come to memorandum of agreements on contractual issues related to getting us back onto remote and distance learning. And so what I'm asking of the community is patience and foresight. How can we all work together? I've been with you now for 13 years as an administrator, and each and every time that these communities have faced a challenge, the best of people have shown up to handle it. This is a new territory for us, and I know that we'll make it work out. But I really want to lower the anxiety of folks, particularly of those of you who have multiple kids in your households and are thinking, how are we going to make this all work? We're going to make it work as the family that you are and the family that we are. And we'll keep at it, problem solving together. I'm so proud and pleased to let you know that we've had people say, I will just give my laptops, my computers to my neighbors, just tell me who needs it. We've had people say, I'm going to be delivering food to the food pantry. We've had people say, I'm a specialist in various areas, and if I can help, I will. That's the spirit that's going to get us through the next couple of weeks. To be realistic, it appears to me that we are not planning for just this week and next week. So we all have to shift from let's scurry for a couple of days or a couple of weeks of problem solving onto how do we continue to provide educational opportunities for our kids. I know that the kids thinking about SAT tests and advanced placement college tests and smarter balance assessments, all of those groups, all of those companies are working with us in a really positive way. We just have tonight a new amendment to the governor's executive orders covering many things, including the length of the school year. Just out in the last few minutes as we've been online. Let me read you a paragraph and then I'll stop because clearly we could do this for 40 minutes if we wanted to, but I encourage and ask people to continue to monitor your emails as we send you updates, and in some cases we're asking you for feedback and encouraging you, if you're not clear on something, to contact us. At the moment, all of our buildings' main offices are staffed. I cannot underscore how proud and pleased I am with your administrators and the people supporting them. They are working so hard on behalf of our students, our teachers, our staff, and the family. What we just heard from the governor reads as this. This is about the waiver of the 180-day school year. And he says that the provisions of the law relevant to the requirement for the 180 days of school and certain hours of schoolwork are modified to allow public schools upon reopening in the spring 2020, listen to this part, to close school on their normally scheduled end dates so long as local and regional boards of education provide opportunities for continuity of education to all students to the greatest extent possible and consistent with federal and state guidance. This order modifies previous executive orders as a result of evolving circumstances. And he goes on. I think that should offer us all some comfort. We are going to do our absolute best every day between now and whenever our school year comes to an end to provide our kids with engagement, with rich opportunity, and we'll do it to the degree we can, observing all of the proper and appropriate distance and self-quarantining. And so for now, the schools are closed and they're physically going to remain closed, but we are working very hard to get the programs back up and running. It's our hope that that will start as early as Monday, but please give your kindness and your patience to each other. I probably have received in the last 5 days 40 or 50 emails from individuals saying something along the lines of, we're all in this together, we support you. I've got to tell you, I have not received a single email that wasn't in some way constructive, contributing, or uplifting. And it's a privilege and a pleasure for those of us who work for you to be in Easton and Reading, and I thank you for that. And I'll call that my presentation.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I hope you're taking care of yourself.
Excellent. For the administrative reports, any other administrative reports? Again, appreciate everybody keeping them brief. Thank you, Tom, for the comments. We appreciate all that you've been doing here and for our schools and trying to get everything back to the new normal. So thank you. All right, we'll move on then to, I'm sorry, Scott, was just, I know you had sent along the normal transfer reports and any of the insurance claims. Is there anything you want to call out around those?
I'll just make a few brief comments. In regards to the budget object summary, one material piece of news is we had budgeted to receive $146,000 in excess cost reimbursement. We have gotten a report that would indicate the total amount that we should expect for the year, and it's forecasted to come in about 30,000 more than that. So that's better, more reimbursement than we had budgeted to receive by about 30,000. So I wanted to point that out. And for both of the two medical things that I've included, one for Region 9, we continue on the same pace that we have been, a very low claims year, and that continues this month, as well as I have a draft of February that's not included in your report. It continues the same trajectory. And the central office report that I've included for the first time, I think, since the fall, you'll see that central office has returned back to its normal from some years back. We went through a couple of years of very high claims, but we've returned back to a normal trajectory there as well. No further comments unless there are any questions.
Okay. Board members, any questions for Scott? Comments? Okay. And again, for members of the public, again, trying to get used to the new normal here. Since you normally can pick up the handouts when you attend the meeting, the handouts are posted with the agenda in the minutes prior to the meeting. So do go and look for those so that you can pull those down electronically, since we won't be meeting and handing those out on paper copies for any time soon. All right, so if nothing else on administrative reports, we'll quickly to board members and any Board of Education committee reports.
Policy did not meet this week due to COVID, and we'll hope to meet next.
Okay, thank you. Any other committees meeting? Probably trying to figure out meeting schedules. I know a few meetings got postponed and are being rescheduled. All right, so nothing else there. Then we'll move on to item 7, discussion possible action. And the first and only item there, the 2020-2021 budget. So Gina, I know we left last meeting. We had about 5 questions that the board wanted either some further information on, or it was just really late and we weren't really prepared to talk on some of those topics. So we wanted to bring those back up. And then there were also some decisions to add some things back in. And I don't think we did not calculate what the new budget number would be at the time because of the hour that it was and people not really functioning to do higher math. So I think there are probably a couple of things that would be good if we could start out with where we're at on the new numbers, and then we can just go back through some of the questions. And then I'll just turn it over to you if you want to start out. And then we'll go from there with the board members and any other questions we have.
Sure. So where we left the board was with a 0.99% budget, and that was after the recent developments. So if you're looking at the last meeting's handouts, the March 5th, there was a slide that talked about the adjustments that were made after the February 18th initial budget presentation. Since then, so we have a 0.99% budget, and Scott has an ongoing spreadsheet where if we decide to add things back into the budget, he could let us know in real time what that apportionment would look like.
Sorry, before we go forward, so with the 0.99, so just to recap, it was where we started, and then we asked at the last meeting to increase Latin and to add the extra section, and then add back in freshman basketball. That's what's in the 0.99?
No,
right now?
so Scott, if you want to if you can unmute Scott, he can let you know what the budget number is with the addition of Latin and the addition of sports, of the basketball. Do you need those numbers, Scott, or do you have them?
No, I do have them, but I'll recap them just to make sure we're all on the same page. So from the original budget that was distributed to the board February 18th, I show 4 changes that have been made. The first was the reduction of $60,000 from the central office budget. That was based on the tri-board's approval on February 18th. Secondly was the, I forget what we called it, the page 5 recent developments. That was a change of 1,743 added back to the budget.
Correct.
The Latin section was 17,523. And then the freshman basketball would be 17,890.
Correct.
So that's an aggregate change, all the pluses and minuses of 22,844 reduction from the original budget. That's a 1.13% increase, or $273,579.
Sorry, can you repeat that number again?
Yeah, $273,579.
Okay, and do you have the split between the towns for that number?
I do. Just give me one moment.
So does that include the $32,000 bond principal payment?
No, it does not.
Because that was something else we spoke about, wasn't it?
It was something that we spoke about. We can put that in and take it out. That's why I wanted to recap exactly what was in here at this point.
Okay.
There's a reason, and I know Gina has a slide on it, that not all of that money would be available to be used this year since our last meeting. So we should come on to that as a separate conversation, I think.
Okay.
So the 273,579 increase, you would want the dollar amount per town, Todd? That was your question?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Do
that
we
would,
do that now? We're not even one of those.
Yeah, I'm just curious what, with our increase of the 1.13, roughly where we're at between the two towns?
sure. So that 273 and change is an increase of, for Easton, 124,971, 124,971. And for Reading of 148,608, 148,608.
Got it. Okay. All right.
That's not including the apportionment swing.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
That's not including the apportionment.
That is the apportionment of the increase. So the increase is,
Just the increase. It doesn't include the swing.
yeah, I mean, that's not a statement of change. That's a statement of the increase of 273, how much goes to each town.
How it splits between the two. Okay.
I do have the total budget change to each district year to year. And in broad numbers, it's a reduction of 645,000 for Reading and an increase of 918,000 for Easton.
Got it. Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions on those initial numbers? So this is our starting position.
Oh, other than what's the 1743?
That was page 5, slide 5 of Gina's presentation that talked about outplacement cost adjustments, elimination of one behavior technician, decrease in the offset for the excess cost adjustment.
Okay, so that was what made it 0.99 instead of 0.98.
That is
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And I could share those slides if you'd like. I could pull up slides if you think it'll be more helpful. Because I could share the screen, but that's up to you.
Is that would that be helpful? I mean, we have the slides from last meeting.
Yeah.
Are those the ones, Gina? That you're...
I have the slides for last meeting, but then I did address some of the questions. So there is a slide that Scott put together that's a bond interest payment options. It might be helpful to see that, but that would be up to you.
All right. Yeah. Do you want to? Let's take a look at that. Do you want to maybe let's go through the questions that we had, and then I think we had surplus, and we can talk about bond, I guess, as part of that, and look at the payments.
Okay. So in the order that I have it, one question that we were asked was to explain in more depth the summer days. So those were those per diem days. It is reflected as a savings of $10,813. And this was at the end of that last meeting when we went through what work goes on in the summer. We were asked to provide a little bit more detail because that's one of our primary things we would like reinstated if we would get to the point where we're reinstating numbers in the budget. We looked at that summer work for a time to close out the school year. We spoke a little bit about that. That's become more of a challenge now as we look into how this school year is going to end. Cutting any of those days, I think, will have a greater impact since we don't really know the end of this year and the timing of it. Depending on how things go, we may be increasing the length of our special education summer program hours in order to meet those students' needs that need supervision. We anticipate questions and challenges in scheduling and conflicts. Right now is the time our school counselors would be meeting with their juniors for those junior planning conferences and sophomore planning. We are very concerned about balancing of courses. That's work that goes on in the summertime. A very important concern that we're dealing with right now are the meetings that have been canceled. So we have had PPTs, 504 meetings. Those PPTs are the planning and placement team meetings. Trying to get those virtually. Some of them, it's not practical to do virtual meetings. So we anticipate more meetings that will take place in the summertime. In order to have that meeting qualify as an official meeting, we need cross-department representation. So usually Patty and her assistant, Susan Manley, schedule those meetings at times when our department chairs and or instructional leaders have summer days, and we could get some of that representation there. So cutting those days, we're afraid would have a great impact. We're also looking at our hiring. We know we have a few maternity announcements since our last meeting, and that will involve perhaps starting the year with a long-term sub replacement. Our department chairs and instructional leaders are involved in that work. We anticipate possible retirements, one that was new, some support staff perhaps. We know our special education director. So to have the right people in the building during that those important months in the summer, I think is even this year even more of a challenge. So we are asking to restore $10,813 of our list. That would be one of the first items we would like to see restored from our point. Any questions on the summer work that I can answer for you?
No.
Okay. We were asked to elaborate on what went on with the counselor visits to colleges. That's a much smaller amount. It's $1,937. We were asked, especially for the historical record, of how much money we have spent in prior years. And for the past 2 years, that amount has been $3,875. We had increased that amount from back in 2016-17, the amount was $1,800. In 17-18 school year, we a reduction of $450, so the amount was $1,350. But since we added money starting in 2018 to that line, and the line I'm looking at, if you're looking at your budget books, it's 2120-580. It's under school counselors and conference and travel. Since adding that money to those lines, what we found is putting Barlow on the map is probably not too big an exaggeration. We have more college reps that are willing to come into our school to represent their colleges. Our counseling staff has been invited to something called fly-ins. Those are visits that are sponsored by specific colleges. They've been able to participate in those. Those are free to our school. And having our name out there is very good for our students. That networking in the college admissions process has been has really paid off for our students, having that personal relationship. So that is a $1,937 restoration if we are to add that back. With that reduction, it still leaves us some money in that account. So I don't want the board to think that there's, and the public to think that there's no money in the account. What we had proposed in our initial presentation is to reduce it in half. So if we are looking to restore things, that would be second on our list that we would look toward. That was that question. Any questions on?
Would there be money saved, Gina, from this year? Because obviously most college visits have been canceled, obviously, for the rest of the year.
Right. So I don't have the exact number, but our counselors were already out on many college visits already. And there are college fairs now. This is the time of year now for those big college fairs, and they have been canceled. So there'll be some money, and that's a great point, Karen, that when we were looking at our budget today, that we anticipate unspent funds because of things. Mike is going to speak in a minute with athletics, the athletic season and transportation. So there'll be some extra money in the budget from what we were not able to spend this year.
So the funds that you're asking for were in addition to what was proposed last year, or is that taking into account money that you're not sure yet how much is left over? Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, we're not able to carry the money from year to year. So if there is unspent money in this account, it goes back to the town in one of the ways we can spend money that the board can decide what to do with that unspent funds. what we did when we were budgeting is we were looking for ways to cut costs. And so we put things on the table that hurt more than other things. So one of the things we put on the table were these counselor visits to colleges. And we took that one account, that 212580, and cut the college visits in half. So there are several of those that if we are looking to reinstate, it would be welcome, but we put it on the table. If we can't get it back in the budget, we understand. It was really just a way to give the board some more information when we look at where we're at.
Okay.
So Gina, so we did ask like what the impact was of reducing that position or those dollars, right?
Those dollars,
and,
right.
Yeah. And
it would be
so
less
basically,
availability.
Right. So, but we still have money in that
we do
object for people to do the promotion and visiting the campuses and so forth, right?
We have some. We have $1,937, right?
Okay.
Yep.
So we just reduced the number, and that was offered up, reducing that number in half.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't
Yes.
recall we were asking to put that back in, but we wanted to know what the impact was.
You wanted to know what the impact was. One of the pieces that the board did want to speak about was that basketball. And so we have some information regarding athletics. If you could unmute Mike, if you recall, we had two reductions in athletics. One was the reduction of the assistant ski coach, and that was enrollment driven. We don't need a ski coach. The team is adequately coached by one, but there was a discussion and a couple of follow-up questions from the board regarding basketball. So Mike, you have access to the information you gave me?
Yes.
Okay, so Mike can talk to you about the history of the funding of freshman sports and the implications of the basketball numbers.
Sure. Thank you, Gina. I think the best way for me to explain it, the question that was posed was, how many sports do we currently offer a freshman level in, and which ones of those sports are covered by the operating budget and which are covered by the boosters. So we currently have 7 freshman programs that we offer. 3 of those are through the operating budget. So you have football, girls and boys basketball. The others that we have that are covered traditionally by the boosters are boys soccer, field hockey, girls and boys lacrosse. So the difference between girls and boys basketball, and the reason why you don't see football up there, is because a few years back we chose to drop our JV level with the thought that the developmental aspect of having a freshman team in football was very important physically. But also in football, they allow something called a freshman sophomore team. So we're 9th and 10th graders are allowed to play as long as people have prior notice. So when we go into the season, we tell the league or anybody we're playing outside of the league that we're going to be bringing sophomores with the freshmen so they could do the same thing. But there's only 2 levels in football. So only freshmen and then varsity. So that's how we chose to do it years ago.
The freshman team also has grade 10 students on it. Is that correct?
Correct. That's what I was saying. Freshman and sophomore play together. And then with girls and boys basketball, that is the other 2 programs that are covered by the operating budget. But just to go a step further, what I did was I also asked the league, out of everybody in our league, how many of the schools offer a freshman level in these various areas. In football, 11 out of 12. Boys soccer, 3 out of 14. Now we're including all these numbers. So when you hear 11 out of 12, we're one of the 11. When you hear 3 out of 14, obviously we're one of the 3. Okay. The one thing that when you hear for like boys soccer, field hockey, girls and boys lacrosse, then the clubs or the teams that are covered by our booster clubs, we're the only ones in the league that have this ability to have booster clubs cover a level or a freshman team. Every other school in our league covers them with operating budget, or they just cut out the program altogether. Carrying on, field hockey, there's 9 out of 12. Basketball, 12 out of 14, 12 out of 14. And then girls and boys lacrosse, 3 out of 13, both. So, and then just to follow up from there, coming into this season, we had in girls and boys basketball, let's stay there real quick. We had 12 freshman girls come out for the basketball program and 13 boys come out for the freshman program. And next year we have 14 boys projected. Now this is only REBA numbers, so there's other people who possibly come out for the team as well, and 10 on the girls side. And I think it's also important, because I know it was brought up at the last meeting, to understand that on the girls side especially, we have 0 seniors on the team this year. 24 girls in the program. That would bring it up to 34. And I know at least 1 to 2 board members already brought up the fact that we don't have an enrollment issue. I guess my last point is the reason why you see most schools carrying basketball over any other freshman program is due to the numbers. The fact that you're only allowed to put 5 on the floor at one time, as opposed to, say, soccer, where you have 11. So you could absorb more numbers at a JV varsity only because of just the mere fact that they allow more people in the game. So just to give you an example, if you had 2 levels and all you did was fill people who are going to play, that's 22 in soccer, as opposed to 15 in 3 levels in basketball. So that's why a lot of schools try to stay with basketball, having a freshman program in basketball, just to offer the same amount of spots as you would for any other school. If there's any other questions, that's all I have on what was asked.
Like, so the basketball was originally put on the list to reduce. Can you just recap the logic for that? Because the board asked to reinstate it last time.
Sure. The philosophy, and when we laid out what we're doing as far as the type of changes we're going to make as we decrease in enrollment, one of the philosophies that we follow in athletics is to cut levels rather than programs. So start with levels so that you still maintain the program and allow people to continue to play within the program as our enrollment numbers go down, with the thought that as we increase, it allows us then to reabsorb and hopefully bring back those levels. Traditionally, it doesn't happen, but it's the easiest way for us to maintain a program while our enrollment decreases. Obviously, athletics, even though it was an enrollment issue on our end, we had to follow our philosophy to stay with what everybody was doing to get ready for the budget process.
Board members, any other questions around athletics, or in particular basketball? Because that's, again, one item that was on the list to be reduced, and we felt as a board last time, without declining enrollment, that we should add it back into the budget, and that's in the current number.
Yeah, I just have this is Cheryl Graziano. I have a question for Mike. Mike, from the teams, those are great stats in terms of just number of where we are relative to other teams that have those sports. Are you hear anything from the other athletic directors in our DIRG or even that group, whether or not some of these programs could be at risk?
Yes, actually, I have a really good relationship with the Weston AD, and he indicated about a month ago that they also asked for him to look into possibly cutting all their freshman programs. Now they have 4 budgeted freshman programs currently at their school. And since that point, they've changed their mind and they maintained the freshman program. So they put it all back in. But it's something that's definitely coming up with schools like Weston or Joe Barlow. Enrollment is going down.
Thanks.
Okay, so the 1.13 budget that Scott mentioned earlier does have basketball reinstated in it.
Yes.
Okay.
And then just Gina, before you continue, just for board members and then also for the public. So, we are trying to move through, we had some open questions from last time that we're trying to get through. And then obviously anything else the board wants to ask questions about in the budget, Ideally, before the evening is over, we'd like to get a motion on a budget number that we can try to pass so that we can move it forward into the town's budgeting processes and move it on to a vote for the towns for our district. So just for the new board members, again, at any time, right, we can, you can entertain a motion on a budget and whatever items that you wanted included or excluded. But that's our objective, to try to get there at the end of tonight's meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we were also asked to look again at the proposal we had to reduce our substitute line, and a little bit more explanation into why we were looking at a reduction, and a question of did we reduce too much? So again, in the presentation from February 18th, we were looking at a net savings of $40,000. It involved reducing our substitute line by $50,000, 50, leaving $40,000. So we went back historically and looked at what was in that budget. The line I'm looking at now is 1,121. And back in 16-17 school year, we had budgeted for that line $131,500. And we had a balance at the end of the year of $50,000, almost $51,000 in that line. In 17-18, we reduced our budget ask to $96,500. We still had a balance, and that balance was $13,941. In 18-19, we had a budget of $90,000, and that year we went over budget by $28,936. So I went back into the budgets and into the actual sub lists and found that over the past several years, our attendance for what gets pulled out of that line aren't just the daily illnesses that teachers have or personal days, but also our long-term subs that cover for our teachers that are out on maternity or out for any long illness or unanticipated absence. We looked at the historical views. We found that we have approximately every day two and a half, it averages 2.5 subs a day due to illness or personal days. So when we looked at that money, and we looked at, as I mentioned earlier, in trying to restore some of those summer hours, summer days, we have several maternities that we are anticipating covering this year. We are looking to possibly restore $20,000 back into that account. It would still be a net savings from the budget, but instead of a $40,000 net savings, it would be $20,269. What that would do, and I believe Gwen, you mentioned it, would it leave us more of a cushion, and it leaves us $60,000. What we would use that $60,000 for then is strictly for those long-term substitute needs. And we would still be looking to pilot what it looks like at Barlow to have no substitutes and have those teachers send in online plans, and they would be covered by Barlow staff. I think we're getting a very good glimpse at that right now when we're asking teachers to come up with online learning activities for students. We believe we will be able to cover in those common areas. Again, the common areas would be commons, which is our cafeteria when we're not eating in it, and the library. And we think we would be adequately staffed to supervise students in self-directed learning. But if we left $60,000 in that budget instead of the full 90, I think that might make everyone feel a little bit more comfortable. So that, as Scott is keeping track of things, if we decide to go that way, it would be adding back 20,000.
So this
just to recap that, they would be, so adding 20 back in, and what would the total be in that item?
It would be a net savings of $20,269 from the original, which was $40,269.
The savings or the whole amount?
It's the savings. So we're leaving, Scott, if you're looking at that, it is 1,100, 121, and we're making that number 60,000.
So this is Mike. Scott, can you project what our substitute line is going to be at the end of this year?
Hold on,
He's
hold on,
muted.
Scott. We got you muted. Just 1 second. Trying to unmute you. Okay, go ahead.
No, forecasting subs is very, very difficult. It's a
Can
bit
you
like,
tell me where we are at this point?
well, we can look in the budget object summary. So give me a moment. So to look at substitutes, we need to look at two different lines, certified subs and non-certified subs. Our budget for certified subs this year is $90,000. We have currently spent about 75,000 with 15,000 remaining.
75,000. And what's the other one?
For non-certs, our budget is round numbers 45,000.
Yeah.
And we have currently spent 27 with about 18 unspent.
So why wouldn't that number be $100,000 for subs? Because it seems like if this was a normal year, obviously, it's hard to forecast this year and what's going to happen, but seeing now that we are in the second week of March, you would think that line would have been far in excess of $125,000, $130,000 at a minimum. And we're suggesting that we're going to do it for how much less based on electronic things that we don't have in place yet. I just think that's a big ask. And I think that if we under budget that, we're going to go over and we're going to take money from somewhere else.
So I think that what we're proposing is not to have daily subs, not to have subs so what happens right now, as I kind of went through at our last budget workshop, when a teacher is out, we'll have a substitute. If there are several teachers out and people don't take the particular job, we will send students to Commons or to the library, but they don't have work to do. We have some teachers on staff who give work to students either ahead of time or they know they're going to be out and they submit an electronic plan. We do have that system in place, and students can then work on their own and complete that work or not. We're still supervising students. We're not supervising them in the classroom. We're supervising them in common areas.
So we're proposing not to give students direct instruction on days when their teachers are not in school.
Substitutes don't provide direct instruction. They're not teachers.
So if you were in a calculus class and you couldn't do your calculus, the substitute could not help you with that.
No, that's correct. They cannot help you with that. You could go to a peer, you could go to the math center.
Does that apply to certified and non-certified subs?
This is only certified. This is only the certified line.
So certified subs don't provide instruction either.
Certified long-term subs do. Long-term subs are certified. They have to be certified in their discipline if they're going to be covering for a length of time, 45 days or more.
But like for this year, you said so far you've spent 75,000 on certified subs. Are those all long-term?
No, that's the line. That's the 1,100 line that it's coming from. 1,100, 121. It's to cover the certified teachers, not certified subs.
Yeah, and just to follow up on what Gina's saying, I was a sub back in the day, and to be a certified sub, you have to have a BA, or you have to have a bachelor's degree, and no criminal record. That's basic. So I could be a calculus sub if we had school, but I would certainly not be able to help those kids at all with their calculus instruction, because I'm just there to sort of try my best to pass along whatever the teacher has left. And if you're lucky, the teacher has left you a good plan. If not, you have 40 minutes to, it's really hit or miss with a daily sub in my experience.
Why do we require substitutes to have a BA if they're just basically babysitting the class? And I don't mean to be disrespectful. It was my understanding that I thought that substitutes, not, maybe calculus is a bad example to find someone who's, got the abilities to be able to give instruction in calculus might be a stretch, but I thought that subs did give some instructional support rather than just watching the class and saying, read page 200 to 243 in your book.
Depends on the sub you get.
Yeah.
I mean, to be realistic, it's hard enough for us to get subs, period, as far as I know. I think it's very hard.
I think it's fair to say that the older the kids, the more complex the tasks that are going on, the more difficult it is for a sub to step in and try to do more than monitor the behaviors of the class and try to give the assignment to keep the kids focused. And this is true. I don't want to privilege calculus. This would be true in any of the subject areas. And to be clear for us, at the elementary level, with the younger kids, we have some highly valuable subs who are able to pick up and move forward on content over the course of a day. But it is not unfair to say, I actually think we all should be surprised if someone who can just come in with a BA and say, I have the competency to pick up and move this lesson forward. That's what you need the teachers for. So when we say certified and non-certified, we're designating the people who are being covered, not the certification or the qualifications of the particular person who's covering for us.
Right.
And the place that we are in most of our in our grade levels, for the most part, most teachers are able, it's actually, in our opinion, a better use of time for the teacher to delineate a task that the student can do independently, that coordinates much better than a standalone task to keep the kids busy. And so that's why Gina and the administrators are thinking, let's get the kids on those days when historically you're just going to put a person in a room for 5 periods and the kids will come in and they'll say, this is what your teacher told you to do. But if the teacher's leaving an assignment that the kids can pick up and work on, and they're not unmonitored, they would be in the media center, they'd be in the learning commons, the cafeteria when it's not being used for food. There will be people there to help them. I personally had to really think through what Gina and the administrators are proposing, but I think there's merit in it, and I support the way Gina's laid it out. I'm sorry, I say Gina, I mean Dr. Penn.
Same person.
Same person.
We would like to pilot it. If it doesn't work, we would be having 60,000 still in that account. We feel like we've been piloting it here and there over the course of the year because we have had classes that have gotten sent to Commons. We have moved teachers for academic duties. These are their contractual duty periods. Those teachers are now stationed in the library. That gives more support from a content specialist for students who may be working in the library because a teacher is absent, and still leaves us money in the account to cover long-term substitutes. They have to hold the teaching certification. And gives us a little bit more cushion.
Right. No, this is Mike again. And I appreciate the efforts and the vision to try and go to something that may be more efficient. I'm just still concerned because we're piloting it now, and our subline would have been 130,000, and so we would have been $70,000 over budget in that, and we're piloting now. So maybe we can get better, be more efficient, but I'm still a little concerned that number may not be robust enough to handle that. And my concern is that if it's not, we're going to take from somewhere else, because that's something that you need to have, is you need to have the coverage. So I don't know that that I'm comfortable being. I think that we may be overly ambitious, though I think it's a great effort. That's just my opinion.
I have a slightly different view. This is Cheryl Graziano, that if we were comfortable with taking out 50, we're going back to 20 to have a cushion. I think, I'd rely on the administration's judgment at this point, and I think I would support just trying it, right? And it's not like as if we don't have anything there. And if anything, the known leaves that we've identified now, those monies could adequately cover it. And then I have, so I do think that there is, to the extent that we're changing to this slightly different model, and there'll be advance notice that each teacher will provide to their students to say, okay, this is what we're going to work on, which they do already, right? They do provide advance notice already. So I think it's worth the try, and the current numbers will still provide us enough room in case the pilot does go wrong. I mean, if anything, I would have gotten back to the $50,000, but I'm okay with what's being suggested now.
Right. No, again, this is Mike again. Yeah. I support it. I'm concerned. Can you tell me how many maternity leaves there are and how much that's going to cost right off the bat? Because that seems to me like, how many maternity leaves do we have? And what is that going to cost for long-term subs?
So I can only share with you current. I can't share what.
Of course, you can't.
From that. So one of the, get my crystal ball. One of the pieces, Mike, and you alluded it to. So we have currently a long-term sub in the building who's been there for maternity. That person is drawing money from this account, this 1,121. It's a certified teacher who's in for another teacher. However, the teacher that the substitute is covering is not drawing a salary because the teacher doesn't have is out on FMLA days. So we have had several of those this year where we've had teachers out and we haven't transferred the money. It's something Scott and I have been speaking about. I don't think it's ever been transferred from one line to another. So when we see those years where our substitute account line has gone over, the question I was asking is, has it gone over because we are not transferring money from a salary line of someone who's not taking a salary because they're on FMLA? Are we transferring that money into the substitute line? And I was told, no, we've never done that. So this could require us to do that. If we have a teacher who is a new teacher who is going to take their full FMLA work, what FMLA does is it allows us to hold their job. But if they don't have the sick days or the personal days, we're not compensating them.
Right, but they get a regular maternity leave before they go on FMLA.
They have to take all of their sick days and all of their personal days, and then they could go on FMLA. Right. So we've never transferred the money. So that's something more that we can look at in where are we, is there money that we can then transfer from the salary line, the 1,100 line, to the substitute line, the 121.
Gina, this is Karen. Is the only year that you went over the 2018 year?
From the past 3 years, yes.
Okay. But that was significant, right? Because that was 28,000.
And again, we never transferred money from, so we had a surplus that year in our salary line because we weren't paying a salary, we were paying substitutes.
So technically, it looked like it was over, but it wasn't. Is that fair to say?
I think that would be fair to say.
All right, so just to recap, so we're proposing to add back in 20,000 into that line. Is that correct? 20,269.
Correct.
Okay.
And
that is before we move to the next one, for the board members, are people in agreement with that? I don't know if we necessarily need a motion, but it sounds like we're still kind of split on if we want to put that back in or put more in.
I'm sorry, Todd, what would the total then be for that after adding the 20,000 back in?
I had like 60, but I think I may not have the right number. Gina or Scott, do you
it would
have
leave 60,000 in our substitute line.
60? Yeah, 60
altogether.
for both certs and non-certs.
Okay.
Is that both lines?
Nope,
Gina,
that's just the certified line.
just the certified
1100.
line. 60 in this certified line. And this year we spent 75. Or the past year we spent 75.
This year we spent 75.
And we haven't transferred any money yet. We'll see an 1100 line, a salary line that's a little higher because we haven't been paying a salary.
Okay.
And that happened several times this year.
Okay.
There's your beautiful clock again.
So the 60,000, that's we were going to add how much back in?
So what we're talking about, if you recall the February 18th meeting, we talked about a para in the library going to full-time and reducing the substitute line.
Right.
So when you look at that, we're talking about if we add back 20,000, it would save the budget. Instead of the $40,269, it would be a net savings of $20,269.
Right, but from where we were before, we're adding back 20,000.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Then we were asked about the position of the Student Services Secretary. And that is the cost to restore that position would be $18,805. And we were asked to elaborate on those responsibilities, where they would go, and what's the impact of losing that position. So the first thing we did is look back to see how long we've had that position in our budget. We've had that secretarial position in our budget for the past 19 years. Our concerns with shifting the responsibilities, if you recall, we talked about attendance and truancy as a big part of the budget, a big part of the job, scheduling of meetings, test material preparation, and being a reception, meeting notes, those kinds of secretarial tasks. Shifting those responsibilities are possible. Our concern is that it could overburden the people who are receiving those responsibilities already work a full-time job. So we are concerned about giving them more work. I think that Tom spoke eloquently about everyone pitching in and doing what they need to do, but we're concerned about that. I think our greatest concern with losing the position would be the reduction of personalization in the counseling center, having someone there, not having an empty office that students and parents would go to. It wouldn't give us backup in the counseling center. So that position is $18,805 to restore. And it is, again, why did we put it on the table? For the same reason Mike spoke about with basketball. We are looking for every way possible to keep the budget down. If we were going to restore something, that would also be worthy of looking at that position. Any other questions I can answer for you about that position? Yeah.
Hold on, Cheryl. Give me 1 second. Unmute you.
Just
Okay.
again, this is Cheryl again. So with respect to the relief or the backup, would that help with all the student counselor guidance and the 504s, or exactly, can you get more specific about what the secretary might help with?
Sure. So those are the daily visits to the counseling office. It would help in the 504 meetings as far as reception goes. The scheduling of 504s is a different secretarial position. But we keep very careful track of attendance and truancy. This position, the student services secretary, takes care of all of that scheduling. So when students are absent for a certain number of times, if they're not excused, there's a meeting that takes place, and that that coordination would have to go to someone else. That's a big part of the job, is flagging those students to our assistant principals. It's also really worth noting that our assistant principals do not have a secretary assigned to them. So what we've done is given their responsibilities, they're supported by multiple secretaries. So the attendance role they do, and the truancy, that's a big part of what Jen Damaris and Julie McTague do, meeting with families and paying attention to those students that need that attention, is done by this person. It's not something that Julie and Jen could pick up, but we would look to someone else to keep track of that. I think that's an important part.
Who would you look to?
Right now, the secretary who coordinates the 504 meetings, and we know that our numbers are going up. That is, it's a burden, and it's just a lot more work. Technology is helpful, but someone still has to put pen to paper and make those calls. I think the greatest part that we miss with not having that position is that personalization in the counseling center. If you only have one person in that reception area, and that counseling manager walks away, there's no one there to greet a family. There's no one there to greet a student. And it's one of our goals is to not have parents just standing and waiting, and not have students in need not be able to see someone.
This is Mike again. That's a full-time position?
It is a part-time position.
Part-time.
What hours is the employee there?
8 o'clock to 2:30. I believe I don't have the hours right in front of me.
8 to 2:30, and it's what, like a 26-week or 25-week?
Right, it's a 10-month.
Yeah.
Have the responsibilities of this position been shifted around between support personnel in the past year, or have they relatively remained constant?
We've added things to this position, so mostly because of the qualified person who is in the position right now and what she is able to do in keeping track of attendance and scheduling those meetings, taking things off of Paula's plate. Paula Panos, our director of counseling. One of the responsibilities that has shifted in the past are the preparation for testing. It's something that falls mostly on Jennifer Damaris, our assistant principal, and we're shifting some of those tests over to Paula Panos in the counseling department. And the student services secretary has been invaluable for that kind of organization. And especially as we have more tests that we're trying to be accountable for. We never had, for example, even 3 years ago, the grade 9 PSAT. And so all of those materials, we're seeing a greater number in school counseling now for students that have accommodations because of 504 plans for testing. So so it's a shift in responsibilities.
Is she the only secretary in the student services? The only person?
Question, Karen. No, there's an office manager who is there as well. But as I said, for the past 19 years, there's been 2. So this wasn't a new position that was added.
And Gina, this is not a retirement scenario or an issue where, okay.
No. Okay.
All right. Any other questions on that one? All right.
Okay. We were asked some more information about Latin, mostly in helping the board understand what constitutes our Latin classes. This is the 17,523 that we calculated. That 1.13% budget includes this. But so that you know, I know there was a lot of conversations about combining levels of classes. So this year we have 2 periods of Latin. Period 2 has 9 students, and those 9 students are made up of 4 different levels of Latin. This is our current year. Honors Latin 3, Latin 4, Honors Latin 4, and Honors Latin 5. And so we have 9 students that are in period 2 Latin. Period 4 Latin has 9 students, and that just is Latin 2. So Latin 2 means that those students took Latin in John Reed, and they came into Barlow. Next year's requests are for 18 students. 4 of them would be in Latin 2. 9 would be in Latin 3 or Latin 3 honors. 4 would be in Latin 4 or Latin 4 honors, and 1 is in Latin 5. So what we suggested was to have 1 section of Latin for 18 students. Or we could run 1 section of Latin for 14 students, and then have the 4 rising freshmen go into a different language. What we were directed by the board and we put into place is what we're calling our Model 2, which is adding the $17,523 to the budget. It would mean that we would be phasing out Latin in the 2022-2023 school year. And we would be, the 2022-2024 school year, if we are going to add Latin to those 4 students in Latin 2. Sorry, there's so many numbers. I'm just looking at my notes so I don't misspeak. So what we would be looking to do is run 1 section of Latin for 14 students, and that would be that combination Latin class that I mentioned earlier. It would be a combination of Latin 3, 4, and 5. And then we would have 1 section of Latin for the 4 students who signed up for Latin 2. We would try to get that number higher. And Paula would do that. Paula Panos in school counseling would do that by connecting back to the middle schools and seeing if students had an interest in signing up for Latin. We have 13 students that are currently in grade 8 Latin. They were all asked if they wanted to continue Latin in high school, and only 4 expressed an interest to do so. But we can certainly go back to all of those students. We could, if the board wanted to direct us to do so, we could offer Latin 1, which we haven't offered for the past few years. And we could see if there's an interest in Easton of students and do a Latin 1 and 2. But that's where we're out at with that. So if we go, or as we go to those 2 sections of Latin, what we would want to do is to assure families that our intention then would be to keep offering Latin through 2024, when our rising freshmen would graduate Barlow. Or do we keep Latin every year and we just have smaller class sizes? So those could be conversations as we move forward. But as I understand, what the board asked us to do is to run 2 sections of Latin, similar to or identical to what we're doing now.
And I just have a question with respect to not just Latin, but classes in general. So we have a general policy or practice, I should say, and also just want to share this with the public who is dialed in, that the school offers, and Gina team, correct me if I'm wrong, the school offers a host of different courses, and all the students choose whatever they would like, provided there's enough enrollment in that particular offering. And if the case happens where there is not enough enrollment, then that number could vary, could be 4, could be 10, and could be whatever the number is, the appropriate decision to say, okay, how should I best spread our staff across all these classes? So my question is, if we do go through this outreach to the 13, whether it be the 8 kids or the other kids that didn't sign up, or we expand it, I believe that, like any other course, like art, which has been cut, which stagecraft, which has been cut, which high level math classes have been cut, EMT we were looking at. If there's not enough offering, would we still keep a class of 4 students?
Well, we thought through the same thing, Cheryl, which is why our original proposal does not have that class of 4 students. It had 1 class. And that's where we're at.
Gina, this is Todd. Do we have any other classes that we teach that have 4 students in it?
We do not. If we do, as far as like a French class, you'll see some low numbers, and the board has that staffing document. We combine them with other classes. So it's similar to what we did this year. We had only 1 student in Latin 4, just 1, but we combined that student with the Honors Latin 4 and Honors Latin 3. So it made a more robust class of 9, which is still a lower enrolled course, but our commitment to wanting to keep those students getting services.
Gina, this is Mike again. I'm concerned because I've heard from several, I heard from 2 students and from a parent that we kind of pulled the calculus on Latin, in that we made it so that we eliminated it before we really voted to eliminate it. I have been told that students that tried to click on to take Latin could not click on Latin. It wouldn't let them do it. And so now we're going back and we're saying everybody was asked, but there were some that were asked and really we gave them the answer before we asked for their answer. And so I'm concerned that there's 4 students, but we had 11 coming from John Reed. And when you look historically at the number of students that come from John Reed and how many end up taking Latin, you would have gotten more like 7 or 8 rather than 4. And so, like I said, I've heard from 3, so that already makes you close to 7. So I think it's somewhat unfair for us to categorize this as being nobody really wanted to take the Latin class, and it's more we kind of scared them off that we weren't going to run the Latin class.
So I'm not sure, Mike, what you mean when you say click on Latin. There's not a click on Latin. There's when the 8th graders are signing up for courses, they meet with the high school counselors in person. Every counselor had a set speech that they gave as far as Latin goes. And what they said, and I could repeat it because I gave the same speech when we had all of the rising 9th grade parents at Barlow for Program of Studies, which is if your student wants to take Latin, they need to sign up for it, that it's essential that they sign up for it if they want to take it. When the counselors went to the middle schools, they asked every student who was enrolled in Latin, those 13, if they wanted to take Latin, they should sign up for it. They also said at the same time, if you sign up for Latin, please pick another language in case not enough students sign up. We know what your backup course is. So I know that there's a rumor mill out there that students were not allowed to sign up for Latin. And I went back to Paula Panos and she went back to her counselors, and that's just not how they ran those signups. The students 4 of them elected to take it. We can certainly go back to those students and see if they want to change their mind and sign up for Latin. But right now we're looking at those numbers, and we don't cut courses before we have enrollment. Students can sign up, as Cheryl said, to whatever course they'd like to. We do ask students to choose backup courses. So if a student is going to sign up for an AP course and the counselor might think that it's a reach for them, we might ask them to pick another course as well in their schedule. We don't deter them from signing up for a course. Those decisions about what courses run and what courses don't run are made after we get those enrollment documents, after the students sign up. So I don't know where the information is coming from, Mike, that we made a decision before we made a decision.
Yeah, no, and you know, again, I just go based on the information that's sent to me, and this is a former board member that said that their son couldn't click on it. It was like they cut it before it was done. So that's where I got that from. But I did hear from a couple of students who said that they would have taken it had they known that we were going to continue to run Latin. So that's where my information comes from. So
Gina, have you heard from any of those students since this has been discussed? Anyone come forward and said, hey, I'm really interested in taking Latin now that it's back on the table?
No, Paula has not. No one has called her, but again, at the end of the last meeting, we asked her not to reach out to the middle schools again. So she hasn't done that outreach yet. So
can I get in on this a little bit, please? Because it also works in the other direction. We've had years when kids have indicated, rising freshmen, a desire to take Latin, and over the course of the summer, they change their mind and they withdraw from it. I do think it's a reasonable duty on the counselors to point out to people that some of of course, the Latin program has low enrollment, and they should think of backup options. And I find it very, very, very hard to believe.
I think the system froze. I'm not sure. Maybe it's mine.
I think we're still
You're
on.
frozen, yeah.
You're
That
frozen.
I find it hard to believe that that our counselors would collude to prevent kids from taking the courses they want. It's not something that I'm eager to reduce. I think the other conversation the board members have to consider when they're thinking about how many sections of Latin to offer is that this is a unique certification. And at the moment, we're talking about reducing the position to 2 sections of Latin, 1 section of virtual. And let me preemptively say, we would have run 2 sections of virtual if we had had sufficient enrollment requests. We only had enough requests for the virtual language program to run 1 section of it. But I think you should weigh that the availability of people with Latin certification is small, as one might expect.
Yeah, go ahead, Gwen.
Thanks. This is Gwen. I also, what I'm hearing in the numbers is that, and I know this is tough all around, but if we're not actually having a reduction, it's just a change in the distribution. We're still having 2 sections for 18 kids, which is exactly what we have this year. So we're really just maintaining it, and it's an unfortunate sort of distribution for next year. I would hope that perhaps some more kids would trickle in, as Juliet has pointed out last week or whenever we saw each other last. We may have some interest from kids from Easton to take Latin 1 if they know it's an option. But I think that, maintaining this program has value, and we're not increasing the budget in any way. We're maintaining exactly what we have for exactly the same number of students as we have this year, if we maintain 2 sections.
Well, we've added back in 17, what was it, $17,523 to add in a section for 4 kids.
But but it's 18 kids in 2 sections, which is exactly what we have this year. So we're not, I mean, we're maintaining exactly what we have this year.
Right.
Do
All right,
students
well,
pre-register
sorry.
on Power School?
What?
My question is, do students pre-register on Power School?
Oh, sorry, Gina, hold on. You're muted.
Okay, so not the 8th graders do not. The upperclassmen do. They get a recommendation. They still register with their counselor, but their parents could go on. 8th grade parents can go on and register also. I believe they open it to the Power School, but I know that the way our 8th graders select their courses is through an individual meeting with the parent and the student and the high school counselors.
So they don't pre-register on Power School?
They may look on Power. I think they do look on Power School for their teacher recommendations, but the actual registration of courses is in person still with their counselors.
And do we know if Latin was an option for?
Latin was an option.
Gina, if Paula went back to the school counselors, the 8th grade counselors, and said that, Latin basically is back on the table and it's open to Easton kids as well, do you anticipate that there would be much of an increase in the numbers, or?
If we're going to offer Latin to Easton, we need to offer Latin 1 at the high school, which we don't currently offer.
But it would be combined with 1 and 2. I mean, is that the thought, was 1 and 2 together?
That would be up to the board. We could do that. And right now we do not offer Latin 2, but we do have the curriculum. We do not offer Latin 1. I'm sorry. We do have the curriculum for Latin 1.
Right.
So we could do a Latin 1, 2 combined. And try to drum up numbers. I also.
But this would basically be the last year it was ever offered to middle school kids to move up into Latin. Is that what I'm understanding?
No,
Right,
no, hold on.
Yeah.
So the reason that you're talking about 4 kids is over grade 6, 7, 8, the kids chose Latin, French, or Spanish. So by the time we get to the current 8th graders, we have 12 kids who are taking Latin. And because they've taken more than 1 year of middle school Latin, the progression would be for them to those 12 kids to come into Latin 2.
Only from Reading.
Now, in theory, 90 other kids could say, I want to take Latin 1. But we haven't offered Latin 1 because you're going from 10 or 12 or 15, that one section of 8th graders to how many kids want to carry forward into Latin 2. If you, I don't know what the appetite is for kids in either 8th grade to want to come into Latin 1, but I think if you are running 2 sections and one of those sections has 4 freshmen taking Latin 2, it would be fine for other kids to opt in to start Latin as a freshman from either middle school. But I don't speculate that we'd suddenly have 25 kids that want to follow that option. There's not been an upswell or pressure or conversation that I can think of on the Easton side of middle schools to put in Latin at the middle school or for kids to go forward. But the reason I jumped in is I think people say, well, gee, there must be 120 8th graders at John Reed. How come only 4 of them want to move forward? Well, it's because you only have 12 8th graders who are taking Latin right now. So some of those kids will opt towards Spanish or French, and others will stay with Latin, and some might over the course of the year change their mind in Latin.
So Tom, this is Todd. So how many kids in Reading after this group that's coming up are taking Latin?
Next year, there won't be any.
0.
Right. And how many kids in Easton are taking Latin in K through 8?
None.
So we're keeping this program alive for 4 kids coming in. And I know the board passed it last time to include Latin in the second section, but I really think, we're going to be visiting this same thing next year if we keep this program going for 18 kids. I'm strongly opposed to putting a second section in for $17,000 for 4 kids, and there's no pipeline coming behind that of students. I think it's a waste of the town's money.
Yeah, I think it's not ultimately our place as the administrators to tell you to run it or not. But the only thing that I think is one of the reasons that we've had only Readingites taking Latin at the high school is because of the uneven program preparation. And starting with next year's 8th graders, you would have both middle schools in a position for kids to come into Latin 1. I think you guys, I'm sorry to shift the burden, but I think it's up to the members of the board to decide if you want to run that Latin, that second Latin period or not.
Maureen, you're trying to get a comment in?
I was just trying to ask Gina a question. Gina, my question is kind of pointed. Is it the administration's position that these 4 students cannot be served in continuing their Latin studies in a combined classroom with the other kids?
Our original proposal was to put them in the class with the other students and have one section with 18 students.
Okay, but that's not, I'm putting you more on the spot. Do you think that their educational needs could be served in that mixed classroom with 18 students?
I don't know their level of Latin. It could be that some of them could be served very well there. It also could be that some of those requests, those 9 Latin 3s and 4 Latin 4s and 1 Latin 5 are going to be scheduled out of Latin because it's a singleton course. So the class may not be 18. So if it's even smaller than that, I have a greater sense of their needs could be met in that mixed class because it wouldn't be 18.
Thank you, and I'm sorry to ask such a pointed question.
That's okay.
I have a somewhat related follow-up question, little different tact. Could the Latin, the 4 kids that the rising freshmen be serviced via the virtual language class? Since we're talking about the same head count potentially who is certified in teaching Latin, that would give us some flexibility to still to offer Latin to those rising freshmen. But then if we don't get the other, if we call the 11 kids or however many kids they are, or go to freshmen, if we don't get those numbers, we could still service them through virtual language along with the other kids that are taking other language, as well as if all of a sudden I don't know what the makeup of our virtual language students are, but say I've heard there are a lot of kids that take Italian or German, and again, they're juniors or seniors, they're not lower classmen, but to the extent that might give us the flexibility to be able to identify, okay, we've got 4 Latin kids and 25 virtual language kids. Maybe over time in a year or two, we'll see, wow, there's enough for a German class and there's not enough for a French class. So is there any thought to that? Could we, from an educator standpoint, think about that kind of model?
Yeah, let me speak to that. The virtual language programs like Rosetta Stone or Duolingo or any of those, they're really meant for an introduction to conversational language. And there is a Latin version of Rosetta Stone, but Latin is, you're studying Latin for the literature as much as anything else, for the grammatical construction, understanding the language. I have heard, and I don't profess any expertise, that the non-human programming isn't really designed for the instruction in Latin. To answer your question, yes, you could do it. Those kids could go. We could say at the moment, the virtual language is for upperclassmen, but we could say, can we provide that to those rising kids? There's no reason why you couldn't do it. It wouldn't be ideal. And then I think it introduces the same conflict that we have with any other singleton course, but now it's a singleton course scheduled for upperclassmen that would start to impact all of the other courses that freshmen need to be scheduled into.
I'd also have some concerns about a freshman in virtual. It runs more like an independent study course where students are setting their own pace, and I'd have some concerns about that in students wanting to receive their Latin education that way. We have one student this year that is taking independent study in Latin, but that student is an advanced Latin student and is able to take a college level course in Latin.
With respect, I don't know that Gina and I can provide any more context for the decision the board has to make about Latin. I think you might have to take a motion or take an action on it so we can move on.
Yeah, Mary Lee's trying to get a comment in. Sorry, Mike. Mary Lee.
We already kind of made a motion.
Yeah. Sorry, Mike. Mary Lee's been trying to get a comment in. Go ahead.
So question, we have this teacher who teaches this year 2 sections of Latin and teaches what, 1 section of virtual language?
Two this
year.
year.
So we are talking about a 0.8 teacher.
Correct.
So next year, this teacher would be reduced if we go with the proposed, without our last week's recommendation, that teacher would go down to a 0.4. What are the odds that we're going to keep that teacher who's a 0.8 this year as a 0.4 next year? I mean, that's quite a reduction.
Wow.
And that kills your program for sure for everybody.
Then
it's something to be concerned about. I think it's fair for us to say that an option available to our magistra is to retire, which of course we'd like to keep her teaching Latin, and then the hunt for us to find a part-time Latin teacher then ensues. I have checked with the high schools that are closest to us to see, is there a possibility we could share a Latin teacher? Bethel does not offer Latin. The program in Newtown and the program in Ridgefield and in Weston are strong, so they wouldn't have a part-time person to split or share with us. So we'd have to go try to find a part-time Latin teacher.
Right.
So, I'm sorry, Mary Lee, did you have a follow-up question?
No, that's it. But I mean, yeah, I to get somebody, I mean, perhaps somebody else could teach the virtual language, but then we'd have to try to find either a 0.2 or 0.4 teacher who's qualified to teach Latin, a Latin teacher. Unless we could offer them something else, I don't know that we'd be able to get that.
Okay. All right. So as it currently stands, because we can continue to discuss this much longer, and we still have other items we need to get to in the budget discussion. So as it stands right now, from the motion that we passed last time, we've got the second section of Latin added into the budget, which is in that 1.13% increase. So as the board chair, I can't make a motion. I will open it if any of the other members of the board want to make a motion to change that direction. But right now, we've got that in the budget of keeping the Latin program, the 2 sections.
No.
Otherwise, we'll move on so we don't continue to discuss this all night. So hearing no motion, we'll leave the 2 sections right now in the budget. Sorry, Cheryl, just 1 second. I'll unmute you. Sorry, go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah, I move to continue with the current motion, provided there's a acceptable number of students in that second section of Latin. If the administration goes through its outreach as agreed to previously, and we find that we still only have 4 students, I still would like to provide the administration the flexibility to treat that class like any other class that we offer every year. That's the only fair way to do it. So I would provide that motion that amend last week's or the last motion to say conditional upon the administration finding an appropriate number of students for a second section of Latin.
Right, but we have to, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, we'll second.
Tell me if I
Yes.
change the form.
Sorry, go ahead. All right, so motion's been made by Cheryl and seconded by Maureen, so we can have a discussion around it. Anybody need to recap of the motion, or we're good on it? So it's basically keeping in place, right? And just adding provisionally, we can, find additional students, if I'm correct, Cheryl. Mike, you're.
Yeah, so we discussed this at length at our last meeting, and it was decided. And just to backtrack a little, we flip-flop too much. We say we're a Derg A high school, okay? And we're saying we're gonna be a Derg A high school that's gonna offer 2 languages and virtual language. And then Dr. McMorran is saying Newtown has Latin and Ridgefield has Latin. And in the end, what we have done is we cut the feeder program, which has made the numbers go down. Okay. And it's just like we're talking about now putting freshman basketball in. And I guess my argument would be, if we cut the varsity basketball team, how many kids do you think are going to sign up for freshman basketball? Probably not many. Why would they sign up for freshman basketball knowing there's no varsity team? So my point is that these numbers are really hard to judge, because we have been saying that we're not going to continue running it. We're still saying, oh, we're going to cut the program on this year or whatever. It's a 24, almost $25 million budget. It's less than 1,000 students. It's I mean, I know the way the net cost expenditure works, but it's still a heck of a lot of money for 2 language offerings. And we're talking about $17,000 to continue a program that has been highly successful for many years at the high school, and we have nothing in its to go in its place. So I guess I don't understand why. And to Cheryl's point, would we run a class with 4 students? We probably would run BC Calculus with 4 students, or find a way to still offer the BC Calculus. We do that routinely with some of these classes. Is it something we want to do? Do we want to run, a class with 4 students? No, we want to try to find a way to be, more cost efficient, by being able to bundle the classes together. But there's really no way to bundle Latin 1, Latin 2, Latin 3, Latin 4, Latin 5 in one section and expect that we're giving these students the instruction that they need. I mean, we're saying that we've made a commitment to students for Latin. I am aware that there are students that wanted to take Latin that have been kind of apprehensive because they think that the program is going away. And I think that it's unfair just to, undo what we did at the last meeting when this was voted on and passed. I just think it's inappropriate.
I'd also differentiate between not running a class, a particular course for a year because there was low demand, and basically eliminating a program. I mean, if you have a low demand for a class one year and you don't run it, you could run it again next year. Whereas this is a pretty final decision we're making. And
Maureen, you wanted to make a comment, Maureen?
Well, I wanted to say to Mike's point was that BC Calc is not the right analogy to make, since what's come out of curriculum committee is the view that the terminal class would be preserved even if numbers were lower. And we're not talking about a terminal class, we're talking about the entry level class. So I don't think his analogy is appropriate. And the idea that we voted on this before, we did. And I'm a real big believer that, once the decision is made, you vest in that decision and you move forward. The motion before the board is not a repeat of the prior motion. Basically saying, okay, we understand that we've had this motion before, but now what we're considering is if you don't have more enrollment, we want to, at some point in time, have the administration revisit this. We don't want to run a class, an entry-level class for 4 students.
Right, but I think in this year's budget though, right, the way we're with the motion right now, and what's been agreed so far by the board is we're running the 2 classes next year. And if those 4 students materialize or don't materialize, we're still running the class, and the budget item is there for the additional 17,000 back into the budget for this.
That's not what I understood Cheryl's motion to be.
That's
I understood Cheryl's motion to be that second class would be run if in fact we had, as a result of the outreach, more students.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Money's still in the budget.
But the money will be in the budget if we pass a budget this evening. We have, because right now we're saying we're going to add the 17,000 in to run the class, and we'll pass a budget this evening. If the class doesn't materialize, the money's already in the budget allocated.
I am not comfortable completely, sort of undoing a prior vote unless there's quite the majority to undo the prior vote. So I stand in support of Cheryl's phraseology.
All right. So we have a motion on the floor that we need to vote on, unless there's any other discussion. And again, just to repeat it, it's basically we're running the section. If we don't have enough students, then the administration has the ability to not run the section, but we're allocating the dollars in the budget right now to run the 2 sections.
So where does the money go if you don't run it?
That's the administration's decision, I would imagine.
And I think wouldn't it fall under the transfer? The board would appropriately transfer upon recommendation by the administration to another line item, presumably, unless it stays in just staff and salaries, and then we have that overage if or when it ever does occur.
So can you hear me?
Go ahead, Tom.
So we will be offering contracts of employment, as we're required to all of our teachers prior to the end of the school year. And so I think we need to have a timeline on this, because I don't think that if, let's say that we make a commitment and the teacher signs an agreement, and then we come back and say, due to this board action, we're now going to take away your contract and offer you a second contract with the equivalent of one more teaching period removed from it. So I think I think it's what you're posing is difficult to us, but we'll do whatever you guys vote in. I think that we can't use the typical idea that 18 to 21 kids is a good size. So if we were to double the enrollment, and then I guess what I'm trying to talk my way through is, let's say that we get 6 more kids that want to get it, and I have to respectfully once again say, there appears to me to be a conspiracy theory that we set out to kill Latin. You've had an enrollment decline. As enrollment declined, selection has declined. And has that accelerated the decisions that people has made? Of course, it probably has. When we compare ourselves to Newtown with 1,600 students in the high school, to our 850, or to Ridgefield with about the same, about 1,700 kids, they're able to offer in Ridgefield Chinese and Spanish and French and German and Latin, and I think I'm leaving one out. It comes down to numbers of enrollment. I think we would have to say that there's a good faith effort to circle back to any of those kids who apparently felt intimidated by the counselors and didn't make the decision, that the selection that they truly wanted to make, or they repent and want to change it, whatever that is. We can make it known to the 8th graders that if they want to try Latin 1 in a 1-2 mix, that they'd be welcome to give that a try. But I am concerned that we get to August and 2 kids move away or something happens and we go from 9 kids down to 7, or not, we're back to 4. Do we turn to the teacher at that point and say, I'm sorry, we're gonna take a section away from you?
Todd, if it was a 1-2 combination class, would it be open to Easton kids then?
Yeah, I think that was the notion you talked about last time. You said to Paula, go back and make it known to kids that some of them who are opting currently for Spanish or French could opt for Latin 1, and they'd be in a 1-2 combination. But we're spending nearly now an hour on this, and
Agreed.
It is not going to resolve itself. You are going to continue to have a low enrollment in Latin. So I think the broader question that Mike has posed is, are there not some courses, particularly Latin being the ultimate example, in which your commitment to program eclipses your commitment to balanced class size or other considerations?
Right.
And I think that's something for us to keep in mind. But I do think you got to just vote on what's out on the table, and you got to move forward. It's 10 minutes to 10. You've really in this budget series, we've spent a good 3+ hours on Latin. I think you've thoroughly examined it.
I would agree. All right, so we have a motion. Any other discussions on the motion?
Well, I'm sorry, newbie here, but I don't know how to vote on this because I would like to stick to what we had last week. So what do I do with that?
Don't know.
Vote no. Vote the motion down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Stick with what was last week. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So all in favor of the motion, saying aye, hold your hands up so I can see. Thank you. I'm just going to rattle them off here just to make sure I've got them. So I've got Maureen and Cheryl in favor. Anyone else in favor? All right, and opposed? I've got Juliet, Gwen, Mike, Karen, and I'll raise Todd. All right, so motion does not pass. So the motion from last week is still on the table, or not on the table, but it's still in the budget, of including the second section of Latin into the budget at $17,523. And I think we should move on from Latin since we have thoroughly discussed it multiple times.
Agreed.
So Gina, I think we still had a couple items and a couple actually, unfortunately, pretty meaty ones that we need to still talk through, but maybe we can do an easy one. The custodian was one we asked about.
And that's the last one.
So we could do that. And then I have on my list, we need to talk about the bond premium and where we're going to do with that. And then the surplus.
Correct.
This year's budget is the last 2 items, which
that's correct.
Tackle fairly well. Yeah. They won't be fast. So let's talk about the custodian cost.
So the custodian first, and then it'll be Scott's turn here. So I thought it would be helpful. We were asked to bring some information about adding a custodian. To start with what we have in our custodian and maintenance department. So we have one director of buildings and grounds, that's Walter Zudak. He's supported by a day shift custodian, 1, 2 grounds maintenance, and 1 day maintenance person. Then we have 1 night supervisor and 5 night custodians. And our night supervisor also works as a night custodian. That's our current makeup of our staff right now. The position that we were looking toward that Mike alluded to last month was a position that was removed in 2018, 2019. We called that position a mid-shift custodian. That was someone who covered our lunch periods and then worked into the evening shift. So if we were going to restore that position for 8 hours a day, which would be the normal working day, we're looking at a cost of about $19.91 an hour to $22.86 an hour, or a salary range, a base salary that would be $41,572 to $47,731. We'd have to add to that salary range $4,176, and that's a shift differential. That would be the money we would pay someone moving from day to evening. If you work evening, you get a differential. So with the differential, we're looking at a salary range to add a full custodian would be $45,748 to $52,307, somewhere in that range. If we split those salaries in half and looked for a part-time person, the shift differential would change to $2,088. I believe that Mike brought this up in the context of there's a plan by the town to build a building down at the stadium. And would we have custodial supervision to cover that building? I met with Walter Zudak, our Director of Buildings and Grounds. When that building is built, we will certainly need to add a custodian to cover that building. At this point, we're making do. If someone is going to say, could you have another custodian? I doubt you're going to have Walter get online and say, no, don't add it. Because it would always make things easier to have extra people on deck. We have missed that lunch into evening person. We've kind of solved that by having one person from the night crew starts a little earlier so that the building is constantly covered, which is important. We do lose our day shift custodian to the lunchroom and the lunchroom cleanup. And that does sometimes pose a problem, but we're making do. If we wanted to add that position back, full-time, 46,000 to about 52,000 is what it would cost.
All right, so I'll just open it to the board quickly for discussion around it. And if we need a motion, we can do that. But are people interested in adding back or not adding back, but in putting in a new position for the 45 to 52,000 for the custodian?
Can I ask a quick question? Can one of the 5 night custodians, the one that's already moved earlier, can that position not be made 2 people to move earlier? And would that not work?
The reason it wouldn't work here, and I think it's a great idea, it's good in theory, but we barely have that night crew to cover the size of the building and the cleaning that needs to get done at night. So we wouldn't want to pull somebody off of nights to put them on a day to do the cafeteria into the evening.
And I know Walter, I don't think is on, but we're proposing to add a $45,000 to $52,000 a year person for a building that doesn't exist yet, hasn't had engineering approval. I find that really complex as a concept to add into a budget for something that doesn't even exist. And if the building does get approved and they can build it in the next fiscal year, that we could probably hire temporary help for far less than that to clean that facility if we need to do, and then add this as a position in 2 years out in the budget. So I know, Mike, you wanted to add it. I'll let you address it, but I don't know. I find it difficult to try to add a $52,000 a year person for something that doesn't exist yet.
Right. So I guess my perspective would be this would be a restoration. This position was in. We had this position for many years, okay? We reduced this during the year when we were, reducing a lot of things that have since been restored, actually. But we reduced this to get to a number. This was not reduced because we didn't need it or we found that it was a luxury item that we could do without. This was, if you remember, when I addressed this with Walter at the time, he basically said, yeah, I kind of need it, but I'm a team player and, everybody is sacrificing. And so, I can sacrifice and we'll make do. The building has not gotten any smaller due to declining enrollment. The building doesn't shrink as we get fewer students. The building is the same size. We're not talking about doing this just because of the new building. it would be something that would need to be done if you had the new building anyway. But we're talking about doing this because we are, we've reduced the amount of daily maintenance that we were doing, which in the long run will cost you more for, you know, items that should have been addressed earlier that turn into bigger items down the road. And so, like I said, we restored some of these things that were reduced 2 years ago. And this is one of those items, especially given today's world. And you look at what's happening, and we don't know whether this is the first of many of these type viruses, or whether this is a one and done, but we need to have the ability to be able to clean the school and maintain the school. And I just think that it's something that's, again, was there for many years that we reduced to get to a number, and it wasn't reduced because we didn't need it. And like I said, there's no rationale that could be made as to why you would reduce custodial staff or maintenance, given that your building is the same size and your age of your building and your increase in what we've been putting into the building and enhancing the facilities just increases the cost of that maintenance. So I just see it as something that is worthy of being restored, and something that probably never should have been cut.
Any other board members have any comments? I'm still opposed to putting this into the budget. We've reduced it. We've been able to, you know, maintain the facility without any issues. And I agree, when we add more facilities, more buildings, we probably need to look at the staff. But unless other board members feel strongly or someone wants to put a motion, I think we move on.
So I'll make a motion that we add a custodian for a salary range between 45 or 47,000 and 52,000.
All right, there's a motion on the floor to add the custodians. Anybody want to second the motion?
I'll second the motion.
All right, in the seconding. All right, so open for discussion. Does anybody have any other further comment about adding a custodian for 45 to 52,000?
I have, this is Cheryl Grazian. I have a discussion item. I mean, I'm looking at the items from the deck of the February 18th, where the administration did move forward several changes that are not being restored, in terms of just virtual language, that class size is going up. Art, you know, well, actually art, we're restoring 0.2, but we had originally reduced 0.4. Spanish, reduction of 0.2. I find it, and Mike, I totally respect what you're saying now, especially with today's environment, but I'm with Todd on this in terms of, you know, when the facilities increase, you know, incrementally, then we can revisit it, or the board, whatever board exists at the time, can revisit it. But I think it's hard for me to exchange that or have to move that forward and then still sacrifice potentially larger class sizes and other subjects that we're not restoring in this current discussion.
Yeah. Sorry, Maureen, just 1 minute and unmute you. Sorry, just a second. Let me get you unmuted here. Go ahead.
I'm on. All I wanted to say was ditto. Move on. I agree with Cheryl.
All right. Any other comments around it? Again, I'm just going to comment again. I am reiterating, I don't think we need to add a new position at this point for buildings that don't exist. I mean, we're moving in the wrong direction. We're increasing for buildings that don't exist and students don't exist. So I'm definitely opposed. So any other comments?
Again, it's not for buildings that don't exist. It's something that we always had and we're doing without. It's like saying we used to wash the floors twice a week and now we're washing them once a week and nobody's really noticed. It's still something that should be done. The building is the same size. There was really no legitimate rationale for reducing that staff.
All right. Well, Good. Okay. Any other comments? All right. Well, we have a motion to vote on. So all in favor of the motion to add a custodian at the 45 to 52,000 roughly range. For aye, if you're voting in favor, and raise hands so I can see and recount it here for the video and the audio. So all in favor, aye for the motion. Got one. We got Mike and all opposed. Sorry, and Gwen. So Mike and Gwen in favor. Yeah, and then opposed. So everyone else, Karen, Cheryl, Maureen, Mary Lee, Juliet, and Todd. So his motion is defeated. All right. So we'll move on to Gina. I think we had two other items, and then obviously we can open it up for anything else that people want to talk about in the budget. But we did have two other items I think we wanted to follow up before it got too late, and now it's getting late again. So we still wanted to cover the bond premium from the capital improvements project and how to apply that, and then this current fiscal year's budget surplus and how to apply that. So I think that's everything I had on the list. Gina, did you have anything else on your list from last time?
I did not. Nope, that was it.
Great. So Scott, I think you're unmuted if you're going to address these couple items.
Sure.
Your choice. Which one do you want to cover first? Bond premium or
I'll start with
budget surplus?
I'll start with the bond premium. So for context, just to recap some of the discussions we've had before, the debt service line in our budget is the 5100 function. The principal and interest that we're obligated to pay on all of the bonds that have been raised in the past. And there's a schedule that's laid out when you buy a bond and raise a bond, and those schedules come together, and we're obligated to pay those principal payments and those interest payments as per that schedule. The aggregate dollar amount for that area in next year's 2021 budget is over the current year's budget by $116,325. That's a material portion of our year-to-year increase as it stands currently. We have an option to pay for the interest portion of that debt service in a way different from the operating budget. We traditionally pay for all of this out of the operating budget itself, and we budget for it accordingly. And that's why you saw the increase of $116,325, because that's our normal practice. But we have a different scenario. We have an opportunity in that historically the bonds that we have raised have matched to the dollar the project that they funded. That was because projects in the past have been of sufficient duration that short-term borrowing could be accomplished until such time as the project completed. You then go forward from a short-term note to a long-term bond, which you raise in the exact amount of what you need. So we didn't have this opportunity in prior years. The difference this year is when we did our project this past summer, due to the short duration of the project, it would have been cost prohibitive for us to have taken short-term notes and then repeated the bonding process and raised a bond. As a result, the bond that we raised is slightly in excess of the dollars that we really need. Now, the amount that it's in excess is yet to be determined, and the reason it's yet to be determined is the project's not fully closed. But we can make a pretty good estimate at this point. The reason this is important is if you have money in excess of what the actual project cost was, there are only two ways you can use that money. You can use it on the project, but if we've closed the project, we know that that avenue is finished. Or you can use it, and in fact, you must use it, on future interest payments of your bonds. So we, as I said, will have excess from that. The amount of it is, I would estimate, in the range of $200,000, subject to the project fully closing. I think there's a portion of that $200K that we could absolutely bank on. And that portion is, when we raised the bond, we were actually paid in advance a bond premium from the bond purchaser, that was a dollar amount in the amount of $105,325. So we never counted on that money in the first place. So I could say absolutely we would have no intention of expending that against the project. So it raises the opportunity for us to fund part of the 2021 budget out of excess proceeds from the bond that we raised. And even though I estimate that in the amount of 200,000, I would feel comfortable saying we could cover all of the increase year to year, the 116,325, or certainly the slightly lower amount of 105,325. The option that was discussed on this topic the last time we met was to actually use a portion of that bond premium, the 105,000, to pay some of the residual interest payments in this fiscal year in 1920. And when I'd looked at the time, we had 2 remaining payments, one of them due April 1st, which is now just in 2 weeks, for 41,700 and change, and then a second one due May 15th for 31,500. Those two together are about 73K. And that's where the discussion arose to take the 105 bond premium, pay 73 this year, and use the remaining 30 or 32 against the 2021 budget. What I need to make you aware of is that that April payment, that check has already been cut and in fact already was mailed last Thursday. And that's due to the fact that that's our pay cycle. I was not alert to that at 11 p.m. the last time we met, but in fact, that's the way the pay cycle works, is those checks do get cut in sufficient time to make it to the bank in order to make those payments. So if we wanted to continue to follow the strategy of paying in 1920, there would be available 31,500 in the current fiscal year against the 105,325. So I should pause for clarity and answer any questions. I know that's a bit dense.
So Scott, I'll just start the question. So with doing the May payment of the 31.5 approximately for this fiscal year, then we have already budgeted the 31.5. So that will become part of our budget surplus, the 31.5 in this fiscal year, which then we would be limited to either spend on capital, pension, insurance, or healthcare, or return to the towns.
That's correct.
And what is our, I know we're going to talk about the surplus next, but what's the current surplus that you're predicting without adding this additional 31,500 into the surplus? So what is it currently?
Well, I haven't done a full outlook for the year, and I think given the events that have occurred recently, it's even harder for me to make a good projection at it. But I know at a bare minimum, it's 622,000 because that's the residual from similar types of prepayments that were made last year. That's comprised of the pension prepayment and the contribution to the medical insurance fund last year. So it's that at a minimum. If we were to add 31,000 to that, it's 650. As Gina was mentioning earlier, when we had a conversation about the substitutes line, I certainly know that we're underrunning our certified salary line, probably to the tune of about 75K. I previously also mentioned that our excess cost grant is going to come in about 30,000 higher than we had budgeted that it would come in. We are not overrunning our outplacements in special ed. We're not overrunning our transportation. So what's the math there? 30, 75, 105, 31 from this, 750 anyway.
Yeah, we're 750 to 800 range.
At a minimum,
yeah. All right, Mike, you had a question?
Does that include the typical $250,000 contribution we make to capital every year with our unspent funds? Because we don't fund it in our budget. And so traditionally, again, we put, 240, something like that, into capital. So are you taking that out as well, or we're talking about not putting anything into capital this year?
No, I was purely speaking to what might be available, not what would
So-
do with it. So no.
So the surplus itself, if I understand correctly, could be 622 up to 750-ish before we allocate it to anything else.
That was, yeah. And just for awareness, the contributions to the capital fund are capped at 1% of your current year budget.
Correct, which is like 242,000.
Right, which again is not counted in that 600 to 700 surplus, right? It would come out of there, but we haven't already allocated out of there.
Right. So I'm saying your unspent really is closer to 370, 380 than 600.
If we put it all to capital, if we put the 1% into capital coming out of the 600 to 7, yes, we'll be down to about 300. But then we could figure out, does it go to health, pension, or back to the towns?
Right.
Well, 800 less 250 is going to be.
Yeah, or 6 or what? Yeah, if we're to the high end, yes. So if we're at the 800 minus the 250, we still have.
I'm a lot more comfortable starting with a more conservative number when we don't know what's going to happen in the next couple months. As far as we're talking about unspent funds from now until the end of June, and we have no idea what's happening to the end of June.
And I'm sorry, I don't want to try to. I know the two topics are kind of intertwined a little bit, but I guess we have to make a decision on what we're doing with the bond premium. Either taking the whole 105K right and putting it into the 2021, or taking the last May payment of the 31.5 and putting it into this year. So it will increase the surplus this year. Or we take that 31.5 and the whole number of bond premium, which is 105K, put it into the 2021 budget and reduce that payment for the bond. So I think, the decision is, do we have surplus we have to deal with. Do we want to increase the surplus by another 31.5 by adding some bond premium into it, or leave the surplus as is in the 650 to 800 range and deal with that without adding the other 31,000 that we can with bond premium?
Yeah.
I'm always in favor of paying down our debts, so I think we should pay it off, but.
Yeah, we have to pay. Yeah, so it's just a matter of, do we pay a little bit now,
in advance.
or put it all into next year? Because we're basically just going to increase our surplus for the 19 to 20 year.
Yeah, and I should clarify, the decision is where the funds come from. We need to pay, we're obliged to pay on the schedule on which we're obliged to pay it. So we're not paying anything early.
No,
like
okay.
It's a matter of what.
Yeah, we don't reduce our interests or anything like that. We can't make extra payments. We can't pay.
It's not like a mortgage.
Not like a mortgage, unfortunately. Mike, you had a question or a comment?
So again, I also favor, paying things off. And I know in the past, Scott explained it, very well, that in the past, normally we only borrow what we need. And so anything that we don't need from the short-term borrowing, we don't borrow when we do our bonds. So we don't end up but because of the fees and things this time, we're in a different spot. The only thing I'd like to make everyone aware of is that we do year-over-year budgeting, and the taxpayers see our year-over-year budget numbers. And so what happens is, this year, the same $116,000 increase, which Scott is saying is the majority of our budget increase, will almost identical amount comes off next year. So next year, when we would be doing our budget, we would have $116,000 coming off of the long-term debt, which makes your budgeting easier, right? So what we're saying now is, if we prepay that, then you're basically going to be flat. So you're not going to get that $116,000 reduction like as would come off, going down the ladder, we would be flat. And so again, I'm not advocating for something deceptive. I'm just saying that we need to be aware that next year we're losing more students. We're going to be contracting again. And so that, once you borrow more money, you bump, and then you start to, incrementally come down. We wouldn't be coming down incrementally next year. We would be flat.
Right, but I think the matter, if I understand correctly, right, we have to pay this money next year no matter what. We have an option. We can put the bond premium 105K into next year's operating budget, which reduces that line item for the 2021 year. We will still have the 100 and whatever thousand in the 21-22 year. So it's even if it's zero in this line item for next year because of the bond premium, and 2 years out, it's going to be back up to 100 or whatever the payment is that we have to make that year, right? So there's no overall reduction. It's just a reduction next year. To your point, if you're looking at year over year, that line item is going to be zero because we put the bond premium towards it. The next year out, you'll see $100,000 difference between this year because we won't have the bond premium 2 years out.
That's all.
That's really the only thing. So I think, again, the matter that's still on the table is, do we want to put $31,500 into this fiscal year, which will be turned into excess surplus that we'll have to deal with, or put it into this current budget that we're talking about tonight to reduce the budget by the 105K?
Right.
That's the matter that's on the table that we just need to give direction on. Is that correct, Scott?
I think there are two questions. I think there's the question about this year and the question about next year. Maybe you.
Yes.
Both of
Yes. So again, I can't make a motion, but I like to understand how the board wants to move forward with this. Again, it's we can put some money, 31,500, into the 1920 budget, the current one, for that last payment in May, or we can take all 105K and put it into the 2021 budget against the bond payment line item. That I think those are really the only two options that we've got. We've got to do something with the bond premium.
Yeah. I could go either way, but so I'll make a motion that we put 31,000 or 32,000 into the to pay the bond premium for the 2019, 20 or 2020, 2021, and put the rest in next year. 19, 20, and then 20, 20, 21.
So the most. Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
Yes.
I was a little awkward there, but
be 31,500 to the May 15, 2020 payment.
Right.
And 73,825 to offset or reduce, I should say, the 2021 budget in the 5,100 function.
Yes. That's what you said, right, Mike?
Yes. Yes, I have so many numbers on my page.
I know, right? That's the same way. All right, so we have a motion on the table. Does everybody understand it? Or need to recap it? So the motion again is to take part of the bond premium, $31,500, to make the May payment in 2020. So that's part of the 1920 budget. Then the remaining 103,000 and change would go into the 2021 budget to offset the bond line there. So that's the motion on the table, if I understand it correctly. So we need a second.
Second.
Okay, so Mary Lee, second. All right, so further discussion. I'm just going to start out by saying I would rather put all 105K in bond premium in the 2021 budget. I think wherever our surplus ends up for the 1920, from the 600 to the 800,000, adding another 31,000 into it, I don't think is necessary. I'd rather put it into the 2021 budget that we're talking about tonight, and reduce that line. Sorry, let me unmute you, Maureen. Okay.
Ditto.
Just ditto. Moving on. I agree with you.
So other comments? Questions? All right. So sorry, Cheryl, you. You there.
Yeah, I'm with you and Maureen on this in terms of, because we have to deal with the surplus anyway, what to do with the surplus this year. So that would just be adding to what do we want to do with
yeah, it's another 30,000 in surplus that we've got to deal with. So, all right. No other. Sorry, Juliet, were you looking to talk? No. Okay, sorry. All right. Then
Wait,
we'll
can I
and,
just ask one quick question?
Yeah, sorry.
So
go ahead.
there's no benefit to paying the 31 this year. Is that what I'm understanding?
We've already budgeted. Yeah, the money has already been budgeted for this year.
Right.
So all we're doing is creating extra surplus with it. It's already in the budget.
Okay.
Okay. So so the motion is the 31,500 in the May 20 payment for the 1920 budget and put in one budget. So we'll go ahead and vote on that. All in favor of doing that? And get the count. So we've got Marilee and Mike in favor.
Yeah.
No, the volume is low.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
couldn't hear you.
You were fading out, Todd.
Yeah, I got it. It's getting late. So again, just to recount that, since it's a motion we're voting on, so the motion was to take the 31,500 in bond premium to the May 20 payment, which is part of the 1920 budget, and then the remaining 73,000 bond premium, put that into the 2021 budget against the budget payment line item 51 something. So that's the motion that we have on the floor, and I didn't get the line item correct for the 2021, but that's the motion that we have on the floor to vote on. So again, all in favor of putting 31.5 in this year and the remainder into the next year, if you say aye and raise your hand so I can get a count here on the video. So I've got Marilee and Mike in favor. Opposed. So opposed, raise hand as well. I've got Todd, Cheryl, Gwen, Maureen, and Karen. So it is defeated. So so we're not splitting it. So I don't know if we need a motion. Is basically the majority in favor then of putting the bond premium into the 2021 budget. Does anybody have any other notion they want to do to make a motion?
The 2020-21 budget.
Okay, so everybody's in agreement with that. Well,
Yes.
I know not everybody's in agreement with it, but it sounds like the majority is in agreement with that.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
All right. So one thing, Scott, I guess you'll need to start looking at that to, add into the 20 or reduce in the 2021 budget, right? We'll be able to take the whole 105K. So if you wanted to start modeling that, and then unfortunately though, you have to participate in the next conversation, which is the surplus, which we were talking about previously, which is in the 622K, could be close to 800K. What do you want to do with that? And I don't know, Scott, do you need direction from us as part of this budget to make this decision? I know it's been a discussion of, do we put into capital, put into pension, put into healthcare, or return to the town?
In regards to the 1920 budget, no, I don't need any current discussion on that. That's something we would typically take up in our June meeting. But if the board would like to direct any of these funds to offset the 2021 budget, we need to have that conversation now and reach a conclusion on that.
And is that a possibility to move it into the next fiscal year? I always thought we had to either apply it to capital as 1% of the capital, or it had to go to healthcare, pension, or return to the towns.
Yeah, so let me talk about how we got here. The reason we have the 622,000 that we've talked about is that in June of last year, the board elected to use unexpended funds from the 18-19 budget to pay for the already budgeted 1920 pension contribution. And the reason that works that way is similar to a bond payment, we're obligated to make a pension. A pension payment is calculated for us by an actuary. The pension payment that is currently in the 2021 budget upcoming was determined by our actuary last October. They calculate that number forward for us as of this coming July 1. So they forward calculate it for us. They do that for us because they realize that the timing of the way our budgets work, those things need to be determined well in advance and scheduled out, and give us time to incorporate them into an appropriation cycle. So we have a number in our 2021 budget that we're considering. That number is $200,870. Last year, the board, in a very similar circumstance, had excess available funds and chose to pay that July payment in the 1920 budget from available funds in 1819. The reason that this is different from you can't pay something from one budget in another is that obligation exists all the time, just like our debt exists all the time. Until such time as the obligation goes away, it's there. We're not paying for a period salary that occurred during a certain time. We're not paying for a vendor who performed a service at a certain time. We're not purchasing a supply that's for use in a specific period of time. We're paying a pension obligation which lasts over decades, frankly. And this happens to be this year's calculation by the actuary of the amount that's owed. So where the source of those funds come from is open. Typically, we would certainly say, this is the itemized estimate of what we need to pay for next year in order to get us through that year. And that is going to be associated with those costs that are related to that period of time. But when we have things like pension payments, when we have things like medical payments, which is the second category, those are ongoing obligations that we have because we've undertaken to have a pension plan benefit for our employees that we're responsible for paying. We've undertaken to have a medical fund for our employees. And we've said that we would pay those claims obligations whenever they arose. So it is different from saying we need to pay this salary because that salary existed in a specific duration. It's different from saying we need to buy these supplies that are associated with this class, which has a very specific duration. We needed to pay this vendor to make this repair or to make this install this new carpeting for us because that also had a very specific time that it was coming due. That you can't do. You can't say, I'm going to go buy ahead all my copy paper for next year just because I have money to do that now. So the board in the June meeting at the end of the 18-19 year expended the $200,877 from the 18-19 budget that in essence prepaid the 19-20 budgeted pension contribution that was due in July of that year. That means that at the time that the board made that decision, they also directed that that money should not be expended in this fiscal year until such time as the board directed me further as to how to expend it. So that leaves us with the $200,877 in this current fiscal year that remains unencumbered and not currently designated for any specific purpose. The very same concept applies to the medical fund, and that dollar amount is $422,480. So between the two, we're talking about 625-ish in unexpended funds in this current fiscal year that if we chose to direct them either toward next year's pension contribution amount or a portion of next year's estimated health insurance reserve amount, that decision could be made at this time.
Mike, you have a comment?
Yeah, so again, I've been doing this for a couple of years, and I'm just gonna say that even though it sounds very simple, we're gonna end up where we're chasing 350, or maybe we're chasing $700,000 in the next budget year. Okay, the next budget that we work on, if we do this, we're going to come in chasing $700,000 right off the bat because there'll be $700,000 worth of costs that we had prepaid for the budget year before that are going to be in our budget that are going to look like they're big increases. And I just want to be on the record as saying that that is going to make it extremely challenging, given the decline in enrollment, that we're going to be chasing $700,000 right off the bat. I think that it's, I think that that's a challenging situation we're going to find ourselves in.
I'll just add one additional piece of context to that. There are always a lot of moving parts in a budget, and we can't predict where we might be next year. I think your point is good. The one thing I would add to it is we do have a known reduction in our principal and interest payment obligation as we move from 2021 into 21-22. So that would be a reduction of 242,000 or 1% of the budget if all else remains unchanged.
But did we pay part of that already?
No. That's the reduction in the year following next year.
You're just saying because there's a built-in principal decrease, it's automatic, the interest payments automatically going to go down that year. So in that particular year, you won't be making up 500K instead of 700.
Correct.
2 years out, yeah.
Yeah.
So we'd be in the whole 550 instead of 750.
I mean, when in that particular, if we get to that point, we could take the option to return the money to the towns.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is once you do your budget and you put that money in, when you need it in the following budget, you're adding that money to the budget. And so your budget, what's $500,000? 2% almost. So you're going to start out with a 2% increase for your budget just to put in the things that budget the year before, but you prepaid.
Right. So 2 years out, we would be
2 years out, you're starting with a 2% increase
right
For
away.
a flat budget.
For a flat budget. And
Would
it's challenging.
would that be the case though? If we prepaid, it wouldn't affect those following years at all? You know what I mean? They would still be that high? I'm new, so I don't really.
No, but it's an ongoing.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, exactly. But I'm just saying. Prepaying it doesn't get you anything other than the perception that you had all this extra money. Is that, and then you won't get it next year? That's your worry.
You'll be chasing it down the road. It seems very simple when we look at it this way and we say we can reduce everything this year, and it seems like it's simple, but just use the example, if we prepaid our health insurance this year, take this year's money, paid it for next year, right? It's great. Next year's budget looks great. The following year, your health insurance goes up 20% because it went up 10% and then the 10% that you prepaid, so you're up 20%. So it becomes challenging at that point to make the numbers balance.
Right. So basically, we look good for next year, but 2 years out, we have a big increase because we zeroed out the line items this year.
Right.
That's the difficulty. I mean, there's an upside and a downside. So that's the downside.
And if we return the money to the towns, does that affect our future budgets at all? Like the perception of, where did all that extra come from? But
no, we've given money back to the towns. I want to say 5 years ago, we gave back some money to the towns. The towns just take the money and put it into their reserve fund, their rainy day fund, and use it for the health of the town. What we typically do is we take our unspent funds, we don't say surplus, but we unspent funds, and we put them into like the health reserve or the pension, because what happens is, you know, the health reserve is very robust and very healthy until it's not. And that happens really quickly. It's like 1 year, all of a sudden you go, we don't know what's happening. We've had 3 people hit the stop loss and we're down 500,000 in our health reserve. And it's at that point that you say, gee, it would have been nice if we had it in there, because we're in a unique situation being a regional school district. We can't just go back to one town and say, can you give us 200,000 to get us through the end of the year with health insurance? We actually have to go and have a referendum by both towns that they both, you know, contribute that portioned number to get us through. So that's, you know, why it's we usually err on the side of caution.
But also to your point, right, if we have the 622K surplus, let's just be on the conservative side, right? And we split that proportionally by the 1920 school year, and let's say 200,000 of it goes to Easton, it's going, to your point, going to the general operating fund, right? There is, which offsets taxes in the town longer term, but there's no, you know, confirmation that it's, you know, going to be used for education in the K-8 program, right? It's to the town to decide what to do. It goes into their operating fund.
Regardless that it's been earmarked for education to start with, basically.
That's correct. Doesn't matter. It's money returned back to the taxpayers of the town.
Usually into the general reserve, yeah.
Yeah, and then our problem will become for Region 9, as we've been talking about, we reduce next year, and then 2 years from now, we go ask for a big increase right away because we didn't have that money going forward. So we return some money to the town, which is great. I'm always in favor of that. But then 2 years from now, we're going to ask a lot more from the town.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as a regional board, the town doesn't have, you know, any say because we're on finance committee, and whatever we pass goes to the towns.
Right.
So that's traditionally why we've tried to put it into, you know, pension, capital, healthcare.
Yeah.
So lessen the burden year over year, smooth it out a little bit.
Yeah, for many years, we made additional contributions to our pension above and beyond what the actuary, you know, recommended. But we actually were chasing because we had many years where during the difficult years of the building project, there were years that the board skipped putting pension money in. So we kind of did a pretty good job of putting additional funding in there each year as we went along, and kind of got ourselves to where we're actually, I think, back where we were, you know, we should be. So that's one of the challenges we've had with pension. But I think pension, we're actually in a pretty good spot with it now. That's my
pension and healthcare both, right? We're in a pretty good place on the
Yes.
healthcare reserve as well as on pension, but you know, it's always good to fund both of those, obviously, because we could have higher healthcare claims.
Right.
And pension claims. So it's always good to keep those funded, and we're in a good place with both of those. So I guess it's from the board then, you know, if there's any direction, otherwise we deal with the surplus, or sorry, the excess at the end of the fiscal year and allocate, and we can choose at that time to go to the towns or to healthcare, pension, insurance claim. I guess the decision again still on the table is, do we want to use any of that right now and put it into the 2021 budget?
I would err on the side of caution, but that's my personal opinion.
So again, if anybody is interested in doing so, we need a motion. Otherwise, we'll move on, and then we'll deal with the excess funds when we get the actual dollar amount and in our next. Scott, we normally do those in the May, June. I'm trying to remember when we June meeting. We usually allocate it right before the end of the fiscal year.
Right.
Yeah.
So this would be the only time really if we want to use any of it going into this current budget we're talking about 2021. This is the only opportunity really to make that decision.
That's correct, yeah.
We can make the decision on the excess in June and using it otherwise.
Yep.
The other accounts.
Yes.
Okay. So it's up to the board again. If hearing no motion or any further discussion, and we'll deal with it as part of the June meeting and the excess funds and deal with it then, how we want to allocate it. Which again, giving back to the towns, pension, capital, or healthcare are all options that we can deal with. Okay. All right, Scott, anything else that you need direction? So
I was just going to say, you're going to come to a point where you'd like to recap for their current position.
That's where I'm at right now.
I'm going to
need you to do math.
I'd like to recap those line by line, and because there were a variety of discussions, some of them I certainly know where we were, but I want to validate them line by line so we have absolute clarity on each of those before we get
Yes,
to it.
and then I'll ask if you, as we're doing that, or I can try and recap if you can plug them into the model there so we can get to a number.
Yep.
So that we can start having actual motions on our budget number to try to arrive at a number here this evening.
Yep.
If we can go there. So do you want to recap through what you had for the numbers, or I can?
Sure. Yeah, why don't I do that? So I start all the way back at the original budget, February 18th. We took 60,000 out to reduce central office. We then added back 1,743 for the various changes that had occurred.
Yeah, from page 5.
Yep, from page 5. That brought us to the 0.99. We added the additional partial FTE for Latin at 17,523. We put
basketball back in.
Yes, I have basketball 17,890.
Yeah.
Yes.
I believe we put the counselor visits back in, did we, or no?
We hadn't as of that point.
No, we had not.
We had gotten to where you just said got us, I believe, to 1.13.
Yeah, okay. So then we had put 20,000 in for substitutes.
Yes, 20,269.
I had a flat 20. Is it 20,269?
20,269.
Is the amount
That's what I had. Yeah, 20,269 for substitutes.
That's the amount we would increase the budget by.
Into the certified substitute line.
Correct. Okay. All right. We just decided in regards to bond interest payments that we would use $105,325 from the bond fund to pay rather than the operating budget. So that reduces the budget by $105,325. So if I do not include the 1937 for counselor visits.
Just one moment, Scott, the 10,800 for the days, the summer days that was our top priority to reinstate.
Right. Was there any decision to include that?
I'm not sure. That's what I'm asking.
We did not agree to include that at this point.
I can read out where we are right now, and then we can come back to summer days.
As I say, summer days and counseling and custodian, we did not agree to add back in at this
Right,
point.
then we had this.
Or the secretary.
Or the secretary.
Right. So where we are currently is an increase of 188,523, 188,523. That's a 0.78% increase. The bottom line change to Easton would be an increase of $880,097, 880,097, and a reduction to Reading of 691,574, 691,574.
What was the Easton number? 880?
097.
097.
And what the total budget dollar?
Total budget revised is 24,321,637.
Which
So did
dollar
everybody-
over dollar over dollar, that's actually a slight decrease, right? If I look at versus last year's, or is that a slight increase?
It's a 0.78.
Okay, yeah.
So
thank
we're
you.
a
Thank you.
0.78 increase is where we're at right now. Is
Got
that
it, got it.
correct?
Thanks.
So what would it look like if you added the summer days and the counselor back in? How much are we talking for those two?
Yeah, I would like to see the summer days and the secretary as well.
That's what I meant.
I know that's what you
Keep me honest on the numbers. So summer days is 10,813.
Yep.
10,10813.
Okay. And then for the secretary, 18,805.
Correct.
18805. So doing that would make our increase 0.9%. It's an increase in dollars of 218,141, 218,141. The total dollar increase year to year for Easton would be 893,626, 893,626, and a reduction to Reading of 675,485, 675,485 negative.
And what's the total number?
The total number is 24,351,255, 24351,255.
I'm sorry. So just so I have on that one, the counseling was 1,937.
That was the visits, the college visits.
The college visits was 1,937.
Yeah.
And summer
Right.
days at 10,813. Okay.
Correct. I did not include the
No.
counseling visits as
She
well.
didn't- he
We
didn't
added the
include that.
counseling secretary,
Secretary, sorry.
18,805.
So the counseling secretary was, what was the number again?
18,805.
18,805, and then the summer days at 10,813.
Correct.
And that's no college edition.
Correct.
No additional college visits. That's the secretary for counseling. All right. So other questions or a motion? If someone wants to make a motion. All right.
I'll move that the Region 9 Board of Education approve a budget of $24,351,255 for the 2020-2021 fiscal year, which is an increase of 0.90%. Increase of $218,141.
Second.
Sorry, it was Gwen, was that you?
Yeah,
for
that
the
was
second?
me.
Yep,
Gwen,
okay, thank you.
second.
Sorry, just repeating for the record.
Absolutely.
All right. All right, further discussion on that. So that basically is, just to recap so everybody knows what we've added. So what we started the evening with, that's putting the bond premium, taking the bond premium and adding it in the 2021, adding 20,269 substitute certs, adding back in the counselor, and adding back in summer days. That's what's all in that one.
Freshman basketball.
Freshman basketball, Latin, and the everything from page 5, the miscellaneous stuff on page 5,
Right.
and the 60K reduction from the central office.
Correct.
That's all what's in that budget with that motion.
Yes.
All right, any further discussion? All right, I'm just gonna say for the record before we vote, I would prefer going to the previous one without adding the council in the summer day in, but that's my opinion. I'll vote it. So if anybody else has any other comments, questions? Sorry, let me unmute you, Maureen, sorry.
If you have a comment, you can't say it.
Yeah,
I seem to keep getting muted, so.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. It's okay.
Not on
I was
purpose. I think it
crunching,
defaults.
I was snacking, see?
Yeah, I think it defaults on that. So, not on purpose.
At least it's a healthy snack.
I try. Broccoli floor.
Oh, very nice. And green too. So good.
And green, right? All I wanted to say was, I'm one of the first proponents of keeping the secretary in the guidance office, but looking at this budget for the town, I don't know how Easton's going to react except negatively. I see it as lean, and I see my ultimate job as the responsibility for Region 9, but it's going to be a really tough sell in Easton. That's all I want to say.
But you can do it. You can do it.
Well, we do it at a price, Gwen, because of the structure at the moment. The price is going to be paid by other students. That's not my charge. My charge is Region 9, and I sit on the Region 9 board. And this is a reasonable budget for Region 9, but the price is going to be paid by other students.
And I get what you're saying, and I'm trying to say this in a way that isn't, because they've had it pretty good with Region 9 for the last 2 years. Is there something that we can do as a board to help folks understand the way the swing works, and that it's, would it be helpful to maybe illustrate, what your real rate was for the last 3 years so they could see? I'm just, because I really feel for the difficult position that you're in, but
look, like I said, my role is as a member of the Region 9 board, right? I just know that the consequences are going to fall on other kids in our town. And I'm acutely aware of that. And I think certainly getting the messaging out is helpful.
Right.
That's all I'll say.
Yep, I would agree. Mike, you had a comment?
No, I mean, I understand, and that's really unfortunate. But to Gwen's point, I think actually Easton has been on the, on the benefit side of the apportionment thing 3 out of the last 4. And I don't think that the 3 years that Reading, was on the plus side add up to, this increase is not as much as Reading has paid over, in the past. I think last year it was $500 and something thousand that I, had to present to Reading. So it does shift back and forth. And if you have fewer students, you pay less. And if you have more students, you pay more, and that really has nothing to do with, what you're providing for those students. And I think, I won't be able to speak to the Easton residents, but I would urge them to realize that if you're sending more students, you're paying more money. You don't take it out on the other students because, that's just not fair. So
I don't disagree with you, Mike.
Yeah.
It's such a tough situation.
It's very difficult.
I think that it obviously, if we do have the excess and it's returned to the town, I do think that would help to mitigate the situation somewhat.
Oh, that's a fair point, Karen. I mean, I think that, we can make that decision at that time, in thinking about the Easton constituents, even though some of us represent Reading, thinking about that holistic, maybe that could be the way we could mitigate the messaging should the board decide to move forward. I think I do have a slight objection to the current motion, not because I understand my Easton colleagues' concern with respect to the way the increase is going to shift this year, but my objection is more to the nature of what we're choosing to restore in the budget. And I'm probably one of the lone voices here. So we're talking about 20 some odd thousand. I'd rather see that 20 some odd thousand go to, reducing the class size, either in virtual lang, in wellness, in art, in Spanish, where we are looking at larger enrollments. And
I agree with you, Cheryl.
More of a
No question.
It's more of the nature of the funds. I'd rather spend that $20,000. Like, it's only $20,000, but I'd rather spend that in the classroom.
I agree.
I agree as well.
Well,
so we have a motion on the table, so we all can vote. But any other comments? around that. All right, so the motion on the table, I think everybody's got it. Don't need me to repeat it, correct? All right, so all in favor of the motion with the current budget that had all those items with, including the counselor and the summer days. And I won't go through all the numbers again, unless we need to repeat it for the record. But for voting purposes, all in favor of that, say aye, raise your hand so I can get a count and repeat it back for the video and the audio. So I've got, so people in favor of the budget as motion is Mike, Gwen, Maureen, and Karen, and that's it. All right, and
Mary Lee.
Mary Lee, sorry. Thank you. All right, and opposed? Raise your hand. Well, that's me, Todd, Cheryl, and Juliet opposed. So, folks, we have a budget. Motion passes by majority. So, just to recap for the record, and Scott, keep me honest with the numbers here. So I'm just going to recap what the items were, and then we'll do the numbers. So it's restoring the miscellaneous items of equaling 1743, the reduction of the 60K from the central office budget, the additional section of Latin for 17,523, the inclusion of freshman basketball at 17,890, the 20,269 for substitute certification or substitutes on the certification line, 105,325 in bond premium in the 2021 year, and then the secretary counseling at 18,805, and the summer days at 10,813. Those are all the correct items.
Yes.
Okay, and that gets us a budget of 24,351,255, which is a 0.9% increase, and a 218,141 dollars.
Yes.
And the split to Easton with the proportion of students, the split between Easton and Reading. For Easton, it's an increase of 893,626 to Easton, and a decrease of 675,485 to Reading.
That's correct.
Those numbers all correct?
Yes.
All right. So that is our proposed budget for 2021, or agreed budget at this point for 2021.
And the clock chimed.
It chimed it right on the hour of 11 o'clock.
7 p.m., but we don't have to drive home.
Yeah, that's true. But we're not done yet. We still have a few items left.
I know, but we don't have to drive home.
But yes, we have a short commute. All right. So that will conclude then the item on this 2021 budget. Just to recap, before we move on to public comment, and then I'll open the lines for people. Just to recap, I think next steps then from the budget, with the changes going on in the towns, just so people are clear what happens next with our budget. I believe so our number we'll give to the two towns, to the Board of Finances, and I believe Reading just set their date for their meeting. I think it was May 5th.
Something like that. They moved it out by approximately.
They moved it out by 30 days, so I think it's the 5th of May. And then I think the Easton Board of Finance for their public hearing, I don't think they've set the date yet.
They haven't, but I believe they also intend to move it out approximately 30 days.
Okay. So that would be the next step of taking our budget to the Board of Finance and just presenting them with our numbers and explaining what's in it.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, I'll talk to you later about how that experience is.
I bet it's really fun.
I'm sure we're all looking forward.
Easton carried me out on their shoulders last year. I don't think they can do that.
I don't think so this time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not going to be the reception.
But Reading will.
Well, yes, great.
Todd, go to Reading first.
Yeah, I'll do it right. Yeah, I think they're meeting us first, so that'll be good. All right.
Todd, could I ask a favor? Could we take
Sure.
a 2-minute recess just for to stand up or something?
Yeah, I was just saying, why don't we just move through if we don't mind? Do we just have to get through public and board member comment? But if you need to take a break, I think you can take a break. We'll keep rolling here.
I'm going to just run out for 1 minute.
Yep. All right, so we're going to move on then to item 7, public comment. So give me a minute. I'm going to unmute. Let me mute up everybody again here. And then, so we'll try this again. So if you want to speak, either wave or do a little symbol for the hand, or come into the chat room and let me know there, and we'll unmute you. And if you could keep your comments to 2 minutes or less. I don't want to mute anybody, but it is getting late and we want to get through whatever comments. So give me 1 minute. I'm going to mute everybody. And then I see Jeff with your hand up. So give me 1 minute and I will unmute you and you can start us off. Again, if you don't mind announcing your name and location town-wise, and keep your comments to 2 minutes. You should be hopefully unmuted. There we go. Just make sure it stays. Okay, I think sorry. Go ahead.
Jeff Fligelman, Pocahontas Road, Reading, and I just want to sincerely say thank you. And that's my comment.
Great, thank you. Others? Need a, I'm sorry, Kathy Katz, just give me 1 minute. Let me unmute you. And okay, Kathy, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, good evening. Kathy Katz, 260 Silver Hill Road in Easton. First, I just want to say thank you to Dr. McMorran and Dr. Pinn for all the communication over the last few days. Very much appreciated to keep everybody abreast of everything that's happening. And I think it's really helped stress levels and just kind of really knowing what's going on. We can only imagine what you guys are dealing with right now. So thank you very much for all your hard work behind the scenes. I've lived in Easton for 18 years. I don't think it's an issue passing the budget in Easton. For Easton residents that have been watching the way the numbers have been going over the past few years, I noticed that the Easton Board of Ed has a Facebook page now. I think if you post some things on there with the way the numbers have been over the past few days, past few years, I think it would be important to kind of inform Easton residents about that. In terms of the one thing that I do have an issue with as an Easton resident is the Latin number. Now, of course, I know there's a lot of students in Reading that really want to keep that Latin number. As an Easton resident, our kids have never been offered Latin. With the number of students that we're talking about, it's really hard to justify that money for 20 somewhat students. I look at sports, for instance. I'd like to see the money go there. We have 800 and somewhat students in the school. Mike, I know I can't interact with you, but what, 80%, 78% of our kids are in sports? That's a lot. That's 640 kids. So I'm so glad you're keeping freshman basketball. I'd love to see more freshman sports be supported. When we're talking about 27 students versus 600 and somewhat students, let's bring more freshman sports back. Or maybe let's lower the pay to play number from 65 to 30. To me, I'd like to see that money go towards that, where it's affecting a larger number of students than just 20 somewhat students. I get it's very disappointing for people that are in Latin, but it just doesn't really make sense from a number standpoint to me to take that money and keep it in. I'm sorry, it just doesn't make sense. And especially for Easton residents who've never had that offered in our curriculum. Personally, I'm really happy you guys are going to keep the secretary in and counseling. I think that's really important when our kids walk in that office for there to be someone there. I've gone in for my parent meetings. I love interacting. I think it's really important to have someone there. I think that's huge. Personally, I'm in favor of the custodian. Right now we have an infectious disease. And January 5th, I believe I sent Jen Dismaris an email because my kids had come home saying there was no Purell, very little soap in the bathrooms. Obviously, you know, when we're short on custodians, these things are going to go. Not a lot of tissues. This was important, and this was before the breakout. You know, so keeping our school clean is really important. I was part of the climate committee. I read all the students' feedback on what we can improve in the school. There was a lot of feedback from our students about the environment and the cleanliness. I say bring another custodian back in. I think cleanliness in a time of a pandemic is really important for our school. And I think if Walter needs that support, I say we bring that back in. I think that's pretty much all I had. I just want to say thank you to everyone. Also, I want to give a real big shout out to the music department and all of the teachers that went on the Disney trip. It was an incredible. So I want to say thank you to the board and the administration for approving this. Again, a large number of students. We know from the survey last year that not enough students are in creative activities. This was an incredible experience from our music teachers to all of the teachers that went on that trip. I can't say enough about it. My son, who's a freshman, bonded with so many teachers. It was such an incredible experience. What an amazing job everybody did. And I think that's, you know, those are the kinds of programs where the kids get to be creative and they get to make connections and have fun. So thank you for, you know, approving programs such as that. And I wish everybody a safe and happy week. So thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, just going through the list here. I apologize. Okay, the Gray household still here, so let me unmute you. Go ahead, Elizabeth Gray, Gray household.
Are you unmuted?
Are we
Can you hear
unmuted?
us?
Yes. We're muted?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
So I'm Elizabeth Gray from 15 Lone Town Road, and Easton students have actually been offered Latin. There's an Easton student in my Latin class right now. And also I've talked to an Easton student in my grade who didn't know that Latin was offered at Barlow. And then when I talked to her about Latin and told her that I take Latin, she told me that she was interested in taking Latin and that if it was offered, she would have probably taken that language instead of whatever language she does take. So if Latin was actually offered to every student without the threat of it being cut from the budget, then the enrollment would, then the enrollment would go up. And I'm very glad that I'm able to take Latin through high school, but I also care about like all of the students in Reading and Easton in the middle school or in the high school. And I think they deserve the opportunity to take Latin without fear of the language being cut. Thank you for keeping the well-being and education of your students in mind.
I am Virginia Gray from 15 Lone Town Road, Reading, Connecticut. I'm a middle school Latin student, and I would like to tell you how hard it was for me to sign up for Latin at Joe Barlow High School. On Power School, there is no option we could click on. In the meetings with the counselors, they never mentioned it was an option, and you have to personally ask and have it written down on a piece of paper if you're interested. If you told Reading and Easton students they could take Latin 1, the enrollment would be much higher. Thank you for your hard work in such a difficult time.
Here we go.
Hi, Reed Gray, 15 Lone Town Road, Reading. I think what you've just heard should clarify the earlier discussion. High school Latin was effectively not offered to the 13 middle school students. That's why the number dropped to 4. I hope it's not too late to win some of them back, and I hope the outreach for next year will be a lot more proactive, both to those 13 and to all the kids who might like to take Latin 1, including Easton students who will now have the chance to take Latin really for the first time in I don't know how long. I know this will be especially difficult since everything has to be done remotely now, but I implore you to give it your all, and also to make sure, to let the students know that the board is committed to see them through, and not to drop Latin, a year or two in. Finally, I'd just like to thank everybody for all your hard work, not just in running the meetings and which is that much harder since it's remote, but also to the administration and all the teachers and everybody for, I think it's a sort of unprecedented task you have to try to run a school remotely. So I really want to thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any others? don't see any other hands up, but if anybody else sees anybody else waving, let me know. Looks like, I think that's it for public comment. So give me 1 minute. I'm gonna mute everybody and I will unmute the board members for board member comment, and we'll move on from public comment. So give me 1 second here to get everybody unmuted. Almost there. All right. All right. I think I got everybody. Just looking across the board there. Okay. So board member. So then we'll move on then. I didn't see any other public comments, so last chance on that. All right. And then we'll move on to board member comment. So we'll, we'll just go around here. I think it'll be easier. We'll just start here. Juliet, we'll start with you if you don't mind. Do you have any final comment on board member comment?
I'm just like thank everyone for their patience during this difficult time, and I'm glad we got something approved tonight.
Thank you. And then I'm just moving up on my tiles here. So Mary Lee, do you mind going next? Any final comment?
No, I thank you everybody, and keep working.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl?
I just want to say, thanks everyone for participating. We appreciate the public's feedback. I think regardless of where you lie on a particular issue, I do want to acknowledge all the dedication and all the comments that people provide, and people were very engaged, particularly now. So really thank you. And also the administration, the staff, the board. I mean, this is a great example of teamwork and people working together to get something done in a different way. So really thank you everyone. And it's 11:13, so also thank you for hanging in there.
Thank you. Gwen, any comment?
Thank you to Todd for pulling this conferencing together and facilitating this meeting and actually making it work, because that was not a small task you accomplished this evening. And just to all of my fellow board members, I appreciate the level of just courteous communication that we are able to have even when we have differing viewpoints. And everybody stay well.
Thank you. Maureen?
Stay safe, stay healthy, and that's it.
Karen?
Just, thanks to everybody, especially, Tom and the administration. I know the number of emails and communications that I've gotten have been unbelievable. I can't even imagine what he's dealing with all three school systems. And so I hope all goes well, and I'm glad we got this done tonight. I know it's a hard thing for Easton. I wish there was some way, it could be better. It's a very small increase for the high school.
Right.
So I hope that people understand that we're really trying to do the best we can for all the students, and going forward that, we really did try. Thank you.
Mike?
So, yeah, I'll start out, just kind of reiterating, thanking all the board members and the administration for their hard work. And, every year I complain that the other two boards get 2.5 months to do their budgets, and we do it in 2.5 weeks. And this year we did it in, 2 nights, and one of them virtually, through, the help of our chairman. And I think, that says a lot that we did speak about Latin for 3 hours, but we carefully considered everything. And I think, there's something to be said for that if, in 2 sessions, you can go through literally everything that people are thinking about and address it and discuss it. And I think that says something about our group and about how hard they work. I have 2 other quick questions. Number 1, just to clarify, calculus will be offered to any student who wants it. And we're going to start to notify students like at 11:17, that they can sign up for Latin and
Bring a friend.
because it's there. And if you couldn't click on it before, click on it now. So
Watch out, Mike. We're going to need 2 teachers.
that's okay. That's okay. And my last comment is a suggestion for something that we should think about. And again, it will potentially help us next year. And Scott, I hope you're sitting down and you're still with us there. But we should think about refinancing our long-term debt. Finance now, the interest rates are so low, we would save a ton of money. Even with
He's right about this.
Even the fees that would cost us, we would save a ton of money on long-term debt if we refinance now. Just throwing it out there.
That's a great idea.
It's true.
Thank God. Budget committee.
Can we talk about it tonight in detail? We would have to adjourn.
I need a more comfortable chair.
All right, and I'll just wrap up with my comments again. I'll add to everyone's thanks to the administration being on here tonight. I know it's been a long week and it's only what, Tuesday? It's still Tuesday. So appreciate all the hard work that everyone has been doing and being on the call here late with us. So Gina and Tom and Scott and Mike, thank you, and the others that were on. Thank you everyone for in the community for participating in our virtual video conferencing meeting here. I know it was a little bit bumpy. I think this one went a little better than the building committee and had far more people on it. So I think we're learning the technology. Will only get better the more times we do it. And this is probably the first of many of these, unfortunately, that we're going to have to do. So thanks everyone for cooperating and being pretty civil and making comments and participating in this session. I do want to throw out my opinion again on Latin. I think I'm going to come at it from the other side that I think we only prolonged the Latin program. I think it's going to be back on the block again next year, and we'll be having 3 more hours of conversation and budget workshops next year with the declining enrollment and no feeder program in both the K through 8 programs in both towns now that we'll be revisiting Latin again, unfortunately. And then I also just want to again say, I think overall the 0.9% increase is good for the high school. I've been on the board many years, and we've continued to keep our budgets, under 2%, and we've cut things away. And I think we're, at a place where we have to, stop making major cuts and just look at things from a program and declining enrollment, because we don't want to decimate, the high school to a point that it does impact the towns overall. And being an Easton resident, I think the $893,000 increase to Easton will be hard. I hope it does not impact the K through 8. I see John still on the meeting. So, hopefully we'll be able to work things out with the Easton Board of Finance and not have too much of a negative impact. But I think it's doing the right thing, because when the kids get down to K through 8 and come to the high school, we want to make sure that they still have good programs and counseling and everything else in sports that we're trying to maintain as well as we can in the declining enrollment. So thank everyone again, and we'll work that through the budget meetings with the Board of Finances. So with that, I think every board member had a chance to comment, and I would like to entertain a motion from someone to adjourn.
Motion
to adjourn.
Motion
So
to
I
adjourn.
have Gwen and Marilee, all in favor?
Aye.
Adjourning? Good. Aye. All right. So we are adjourned at 11:20 with a budget. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate all
Bye-bye.
the hours tonight.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Stay
you,
safe,
Todd.
keep sanitizing and social distance.
No kidding.